The world whispered in threads of weirwood white when Bran Stark first felt the storm of wings beyond the frost-rimmed doorway of his mind. He sat beneath the ancient heart tree of the cave north of the wall, roots cold against his legs, ravens restless above, the three-eyed raven a withered shadow beside him. But Bran's reach drifted farther than leaf or bone that day. Snow crackled like thin glass beneath the pads of summer's paws. The direwolf's breath hung silver in the cavern mouth. Yet Bran's thoughts rode currents warmer than any northern wind, spiraling southward across leagues of ice and sea and sand until they brushed the beating core of something vast, reptilian, and sleeping beneath a foreign sun. He had touched other creatures before. Ravens, wolves, once even a shadow cat glimpsed in a broken dream. But the mind he found now was older, molten with half-remembered skies. It lay coiled on itself like a chain of smoldering scales, luminous in the dark behind his eyelids. A dragon, Bran realized, and the knowing thundered through him with the roar of some forgotten furnace. He might have recoiled, but the dragon's dreaming warmth beckoned, cinders swirling up a chimney, sparks seeking night. Bran felt the melody of its heart, slow and immense, and somewhere beneath the thump of blood and fire, its name surfaced as naturally as dawn Viserion. The three-eyed raven's parched whisper bled through the frozen air. Careful, but Bran could not be careful. Wonder drowned caution. He slipped between scale and sinew like water through cracked stone, senses liquefying into the dragon's own. The cave vanished. He tasted salt and carrion on forked tongue, smelled roasted horseflesh, heard the distant laughter of Dothraki riders. Mighty forelimbs curled beneath a golden belly, wings folded vast as embroidered tents. Even dreaming, Viserion was a marvel of sighing furnaces and unspent lightning. Bran's consciousness brushed the dragon's slumbering instincts, dominance, hunger, an ache for endless horizons. And beyond the encampment ringing the beast, he sensed two other immense lives. Rhaegal's steely patience and Drogon's restless storm. Somewhere near them flowed a current of affection, proprietary and fierce. Daenerys Targaryen's shadow, not yet a queen, not yet a breaker of chains, pacing the sands of Slaver's Bay with her own dreams of conquest. Bran trembled, but the tremor was not feared. It was exhilaration. From Winterfell's crumbling library, he had gorged on tales of dragons, Balerions' iron shadow over Old Town, Merax's splitting the walls of Sunspear, Sunfire rising like a second dawn above Dragonstone. Yet words were embers at the heel of the reality. The pulse of Viserion's furnace washed through him. He wondered if the old songs had ever truly captured this tide of molten glory. Then, an opening, a rent in the dragon's guarded dreaming, and Bran slipped deeper, fingers brushing the levers of desire and breath. Viserion stirred. Sand hissed under shifting weight. Dothraki voices lifted in wary alarm. Bran tasted the horizon, felt the tug of thermals overhead, the lure of open sky. Wings unfurled with bone-deep pops. Golden membranes shivered in dawnlight. The beast rumbled, half dream, half wakefulness, and Bran, buoyed by the taste of limitless air, forgave himself the daring sin of steering. He pushed skyward. Viserion leapt. The camp roared below. Chains clattered loose, scorched iron squealing as dragonfire burst, unbidden, around anchoring posts. The sudden heat did not burn Bran. It was an extension of him, like laughter bursts from a child. The Dothraki scattered. Somewhere Daenerys shouted, her voice a bright bell amid the tumult. But Bran's borrowed wings drowned even that command. Clouds flashed by like shredded parchment. The dragon carved spiral arcs above Slaver's Bay, higher, ever higher, until the sea curved like polished onyx and the sky whitened to scorching blue. Salt wind scoured his eyes that were not truly his, but Bran had never seen the world so intimately. Every gust, every thermal was a tactile scripture. The coastline of Meereen lay far below, a honeycomb of jade water and pale stone. Inhaling, Viserion caught the scent of brine, of smoke, of countless mortal lives scuttling ant-slow on the ground. Bran might have remained adrift in awe forever, but a deeper instinct tugged, the inexorable thread of home. The faces of his siblings flickered. Rickon's feral grin, Sansa's gentle chiding, Arya's wolf-bright eyes, Jon wrapped in swirling snow. And beneath them all, Winterfell's gods would called, bloody red against snowy white. But above those calls rang another, a whisper of destiny like cold iron, King's Landing. He tasted that city's name as Viserion banked, sensing it even across half a world. A sprawl of choking smoke, hot cobblestone, gilded towers, and the coppery tang of too much blood. A city of power, one day the heart of Daenerys' fiery dream. What would it mean if the dragon arrived years before its mother? Bran felt the decision crystallize like rime. He folded himself deeper into the dragon's furnace heart and angled west. Waves flared beneath as Viserion beat across the sky. They passed the dusky mirror of the summer sea, rode the breathless empty of open ocean, soared above merchant cogs that pitched in his titanic shadow. Sunrises bled into star-strewn nights, moonlight silvering golden scales. Exhaustion, that human tyrant, did not touch Bran in this new skin. The dragon's lungs were bellows of eternity. Below, the world changed. The arid red deserts of Dorne shimmered like bruised glass. The green quilt of the Reach unrolled beneath drifting clouds. The storm-lashed crownlands loomed, dotted with charred islands. At times Viserion hunted. Bronze sails of krakens cleft apart beneath showers of flame. Mountain goats fled crags only to be snatched mid-bleat. Bran felt each kill distantly, an echo behind the thunder of dragon blood. But the edge of that primal rhythm frightened him, and he steered the beast away from wanton slaughter when he could. On the third dawn, King's Landing rose before them, sprawling and golden in first light, the Blackwater glittering like a blade at its feet. Bran's borrowed heart hammered. Even from the sky the city looked hungry, a maze of shingled roofs and crooked alleys coiled around the red keep's crimson crown. He smelled smoke thick with tallow, the sour funk of tanneries, the perfume of bakeries, the stink of countless privy pots. All these human notes blending into a single dense chord of life. And overlaying it, he caught a faint wreath of wildfire clinging to the cellars beneath the September of Baelor, a green breath remembered by stone. Viserion circled once, wings casting a tide of icy shadow across the city's wake-weary galleys. Horns brayed from the walls. Gold cloaks pointed and scrambled along parapets, eyes alight with terror and awe. Somewhere high on Aegon's high hill, the small council erupted from the tower of the Hand's arched door, gazes tilted heavenward. Grand Maester Pycelle clutched his chain, mouth flapping. Lord Varys' silken expression drowned in candlelight. Littlefinger measured fear in coin. Cersei Lannister, Lioness Queen, stood on a balcony outside Maegor's Holdfast, hair a molten crown in dawn's blaze, while her children, Joffrey in a night robe of crimson velvet, Myrcella clutching a doll, Tommen wide-eyed, pressed to the balustrade. Bran's gaze, for a moment he could almost feel his own eyes again, collided with Joffrey's sneer. The prince tried to cover trembling with arrogance, but the dragon's scream stripped him naked. The king, fat Robert Baratheon, bellowing like a stag, shoved aside servants, roaring for bows, scorpions, anything to fell the beast. Bran recoiled instinctively. Though the dragon's flesh did not know fear, Bran's mortal skin remembered crossbow bolts and broken legs. He banked Viserion higher, the city spinning beneath, roofs whirling like shards of flint. Yet he could not leave. Some magnet of fate anchored him to the capital's crooked streets. Bran felt the stir of ravens perched on Baelor's statue, the rustle of 1,000 rats, the lurking weight of dreams hidden behind shuttered windows. The city had stories all converging at this moment. His own life, once defined only by Winterfell's snow-capped ramparts, now intersected every beating heart below. He let Viserion hover on beating wings above the great September bells clanged, a cacophony of bronze. Septons scattered, prayers morphing into screams. The dragon roared, jets of flame spiraling skyward in a cathedral of fire. The sound shattered the day. Even the Blackwater seemed to cringe. Yet Bran carefully reined the beast's fury from dwelling downward. No walls melted, no streets burned. It was a warning, a promise, fire held in leash. Below, in half-shadowed hallways, Queen Cersei froze mid-command, something foreign glimmering behind her green eyes. The specter of true dragons, long thought extinct, now risen beyond any Lannister scheme. Tyrion Lannister, returning from the cellars with a goblet of wine, paused and stared skyward, a devouring cynicism. In the shadows of Maegor's holdfast, Sandor Clegane's hand twitched at the hilt of his sword, though he muttered a prayer to no god. The small folk knelt in streets or fled, clutching babes. Bakers dropped trays, potters smashed wares. In Flea Bottom, beggars raised blistered hands in aching hope. The Targaryens had come again, they muttered, though no silver-haired queen sat astride this dragon. Viserion's mighty chest heaved. Bran felt the dragon weigh possibilities. To scorch, to conquer, to feast. But he tightened invisible reins. He had come not to conquer but to test the world, to see what currents he might shift. So he turned the dragon's snout toward Dragonstone, ancient seat of draconic kings, its towers visible far off like broken black teeth above the sea. With a final roar that trembled tiles loose from the September's roof, Bran wheeled away. Soldier and noble alike watched the shadow depart, a comet of living gold arcing over the city, leaving only terror and revelation in its contrail. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen, nursing scorched chains and unhatched ambitions, felt an ache like betrayal snag within her chest, though she could not name its cause. Drogon lifted his head, eyes smoldering. Rhaegal's tail lashed the sand. Something essential had shifted. On windswept battlements of Winterfell, Maester Luwin looked up from his star charts, brow furrowing as a flock of ravens erupted westward without warning. A shiver danced across the godswood, and the weirwood's face seemed almost expectant. Bran circled Dragonstone's obsidian ramparts in silence. The castle, unoccupied save for thin garrisons of crown loyalists, had long awaited the return of dragonlords. He alighted Viserion on the cracked yard between Tower of the Ghosts and the Stone Drum. Guards scattered, leaving spears clattering on basalt. The dragon's talons scored fresh grooves in rock older than its own egg. Bran inhaled the scent of salt and ruin, tasting the ghosts of Aegon and Visenya and Rhaenys in the stone. He relinquished control carefully, retreating from the dragon's formidable mind like a swimmer easing from surf. The moment his presence ebbed, Viserion shuddered, confused. Yet woman's scent and dragon instincts collided, and instead of rage, he rumbled uncertainly, curling massive wings about himself as if to dream again. Bran's own body woke beneath the heart tree with a groan. The three-eyed raven's dark eyes glinted. "You have flown too soon," he murmured, voice rust like falling leaves. "The skein tangles when you force it to dance ahead of its song." "I had to see," Bran whispered, throat raw. "I had to." The ancient sorcerer's sigh carried centuries. "So the die is cast. King's Landing has tasted dragonfire, if only the scent. The lion grows wary, the stag rouses, spiders spin anew, and far away, the dragon queen dreams of betrayal. The river of time quickens." Bran's breath steamed. He did not fear what he had done, though terror lurked like a half-buried stone. Instead, a cautious elation coursed. He had moved pieces on the board that none yet knew existed. Winter, as his father once declared, was coming. But now winter rode a dragon's back unseen. Still, consequences unfurled beyond counting. In the Red Keep, ravens would soon depart for Storm's End, for the Eyrie, for Casterly Rock. Maesters would scour dusty tomes for dragon lore. Alchemists would weigh wildfire stores. Sellswords would whisper of gold to be earned or kingdoms burnt to cinder. Across the sea, warlocks in Karth would scry with shadebinder's smoke, seeking the dragon's thief. And in the crypts of Winterfell, pale kings on stone thrones might stir, old magic brushing brittle bones. Bran closed his eyes and saw the delicate web of futures radiating from his act. Threads luminous, threads dark. Some ended in ash swirling over silent cities. Some in thrones reforged. Some in the gentle hush of spring blossoms across the north. He could not seize them all. He could only guide where he could, a boy riding dragons through storm-tossed time. When Viserion finally slept again atop Dragonstone's keep, curling about smashed gargoyles like a gilded serpent in a nest of knives, the 7 kingdoms held their breath. Ravens thundered north and south. In King's Landing, Robert Baratheon demanded tons of wine to drown dread, while Cersei's green eyes narrowed on the horizon with lethal imagination. Varys sent whispers scuttling through warrens of spies. And beneath the Red Keep, in echoing crypts lined with skulls of long-dead beasts, a candle guttered before the hollow maw of Balerion the Black Dread. Its flame quivered, as though the old dragon himself exhaled after dormant centuries. Only Bran knew that the game's first piece had moved without a single lord's consent. And he, crippled boy, green seer in bud, sat miles away beneath a heart tree older than kingdoms, bone-tired but unbroken, readying himself for the storms he had summoned. Silence settled across the cave, heavy with prophecy. Bran listened to it, heartbeat calm, mind already stretching southward once more. For the dragons were restless in his absence, and the world, he sensed, had begun to turn its face toward fire. The hush that followed Viserion's descent upon Dragonstone seeped through the kingdoms like a chill seaborne mist, thin at first, but soon settling in every courtyard, council chamber, and tavern. In lofty halls, the silence manifested as raised voices, endless councils, and officers counting bolts in flickering torchlight. In back alleys it bred rumor, the warm rot of fear spiced with wonder. From the arbor to the wall, both lords and hedge knights awoke to one unalterable truth. Dragons had returned, and they belonged to no crown anyone recognized. Robert Baratheon answered the tidings as he answered most tidings that unsettled him. He drank. 3 mornings after the golden monster had wheeled over the September, the king still stalked corridors reeking of arbor gold and sweat-soaked linen, bellowing for his grand huntsman and a fresh keg in the same breath. He railed at Grand Maester Pycelle for counsel, at Lord Renly for smiling too quickly, and at Jaime Lannister for standing too still beside the queen. Yet even in Robert's thunderous roars, those who listened closely discerned the tremor of the stag's heart. Faint, uncertain, thudding beneath a cuirass too small for his shoulders. Cersei hid her terror behind calculation. She ordered casks of wildfire rolled from the subterranean vaults into Maegor's yard and commanded gold cloak patrols to practice scorpion drills at dawn and dusk. She fingered a letter half-written to her father. "Father, you must see to this beast before the Targaryen girl crosses, before the realm recalls old loyalties." Yet each time her quill neared the parchment's edge, a shimmer of crimson scales flashed in her mind and she set the pen down again. Love of power was easier when power did not swoop unbidden from the sky. She turned instead to Qyburn, whose pale smile told her dragons were puzzles of flesh like any other. Marvelous, yes, but vulnerable if one discovered the proper seam. Tyrion watched the panic unfold with keen amusement until amusement curdled into concern. Even fools could shoot a lucky bolt, he reasoned, and foolish men who feared for their hides would shoot many. He retreated to the Tower of the Hand, poring over crumbling scrolls of Valyrian dragon lore and gaudy tales of Aegon's conquest. Between sips of sweet wine he drafted letter after letter, one to King Balon in Pike, hinting at opportunities on the mainland should a distracted crown slacken its grip, one to Prince Doran in Sunspear, prodding at lingering Targaryen sympathies, another to his own father requesting heavier wagons of gold and grain, for unsettled men must be fed or they'll grow teeth of their own. When he paused, ink drying, he considered a final note, addressed only to Queen across the sea. But he burned that one before it cooled. Far across the narrow sea the true queen awoke from uneasy dreams. Daenerys Stormborn stretched beneath a saffron-dyed canopy, the collar of the night's heat still damp on her throat, and for a moment she smelled salt and distant smoke that was not Meereen's. The dragons outside her tent were restless. Drogon prowled, tail scouring trenches in the sand. Rhaegal perched high atop a dismantled trebuchet, wings half spread to an invisible wind. Viserion had not returned. A mother feels absence like blood draining from a wound. She called to Grey Worm, bade Missandei send riders scouring the dunes. But rumors returned quicker than the riders. Viserion seen above Mantaries, chasing wyverns. Viserion burning Carthene galleys off Astapor. Viserion devouring a whale near Valyria. None rang true, yet each bleached a thread of certainty from Dany's heart. In the dark hours, she fingered the whip she had melted down on the day she broke the Masters, convincing herself she still held her children's loyalty, if not their presence. Yet behind her eyes flickered a foreign vision. A golden dragon bathing a city in dawnfire while thousands gazed upward with mingled dread and awe. She recognized the skyline, though she had never walked its streets. King's Landing, the price of her birthright. Someone or something had stolen her vanguard. When she next met Ser Barristan in council, she wore armor of calm. But the old knight, who had guarded more than one secret Targaryen fear, saw the hairline cracks. He counseled patience. She heard only urgency. Beyond the ragged northern stormfront, in the cave whose walls murmured of forgotten ages, Bran dreamed of ripples. They spread from King's Landing like rings in a frozen pond, and as they traveled they dislodged other patterns. A raven veering south too early, a white wolf whining at a door thought safely barred, a dead thing blinking azure eyes in the waste beyond the wall. The three-eyed raven spoke seldom now, watching his pupil more than instructing him. Bran felt the scrutiny, a weight heavier than Maester's chains, and sometimes resented it. Yet he also sensed the old sorcerer's quiet pride, as if the ancient spirit had long ago glimpsed exactly this tide in the sands of time. Summer lay beside Bran's sleeping body with muzzle on folded paws, but his mind perched elsewhere. In rookery turrets, in the hidden tunnels beneath the Red Keep, sometimes even between the fluttering thoughts of a highborn maid at court. Each night he leapt from skin to skin, mapping the kingdom's breath. Yet he kept circling back to Viserion. He felt the dragon's slumber fade into hungry waken. Each dawn Bran slid into golden eyes and guided talons toward prey that would sate but not sate. Wild goats, sea calves, the occasional unlucky kraken calf. They filled the beast's belly yet never dulled the restless coil thrumming beneath scales. Bran sensed Viserion's confusion. Something had entered him, commanded him, then vanished. Like any creature deprived of explanation, the dragon prowled for answers, and answers smelled like fire and man-meat. One dawn Bran watched a squad of Crownlander knights, green as new wheat, sail from Driftmark on a stout caravel, bristling with scorpions fastened to the deck. They intended glory. The moment they rounded Dragonstone's lee, they loosed quarrels large as fence posts. Stone ramparts answered with booming ballistae. Viserion, roused by the first bolt scoring his wing, erupted skyward like a sun reborn. The knights might as well have thrown feathers. Within heartbeats, the sea hissed under molten pitch as the dragon's flame found timber. Bran winced from the heat he felt only in the mind. He whispered restraint, guiding jaws away from the men thrashing in water, but fire licked faster than mercy. When smoke cleared, Viserion circled once, triumphant yet unsettled, then returned to perch upon the stone drum with a snarling rumble that echoed across black cliffs. News traveled to King's Landing by noon. Robert smashed the skull of a wine steward with his goblet. Cersei smiled thinly in her looking glass, considering that grief softened even the fattest stag for slaughter. Tyrion shook his head and penned fresh correspondence to Dorne. Dragons biting crown fleets sparked appetites in Sunspear like flint flicks tinder. Varys listened and listened, cobwebs vibrating in every cellar, until one hushed voice swore the beast roost free. No rider. A dragon without a master was a sword without a hilt, which sliced every hand that reached. That thought pleased the spider. Chaos, after all, was a ladder. The king's hand, Lord Jon Arryn, whose health had waned since a winter chill settled deep in his lungs, saw a darker omen. In cracked dreams he recalled the Warden of the North, Ned Stark, speaking once of sorcery stirring beyond the wall, of wolf's dreams and giants returning. Jon Arryn remembered Dragonfire in Maegor's Hill the day Aerys burned Rickard Stark for honor and Brandon Stark for vengeance. Now dragons again. He requested quills and wrote feebly to Eddard. Ride to court. I require your counsel. When he finished, he coughed bright arterial red into his kerchief but smiled. Through Ned, he trusted truth would pierce smoke. In the Vale, Lisa Arryn lifted the message hours later. Her fingers trembled, as they did around Moon Tea, and when she spoke to Maester Coleman, she ordered the raven caged. Its wings not strong enough for northern gales. Best wait, said she, until the fever passed. That night she walked the high halls muttering of Targaryens and wolves and her precious son's frailty. Servants whispered, for the Lady of the Eyrie seemed possessed by storm sprites each time her lord so much as spoke Ned Stark's name. South of the Neck, in a castle ringed by God's wood and ghosts, Catelyn Stark read a briefer raven. Dragons sighted, her sister's husband failing, the king rumored to ride north soon. She carried the parchment to Maester Luwin, who considered each word as a smith weighs, or troubling, he conceded. Yet dragons alone change little, unless wakened long enough to recall their purpose. Catelyn thought of Bran, still broken-bodied in his tower bed, whispering sometimes of soaring like birds. She kissed his brow that night, and in his fevered sleep he murmured, "Viserion is hungry." She pressed cool linen to his lips and told herself they were dream words, but her heart thrummed caution. Time, so long measured in harvests and tourneys, now counted itself by the beat of wings. By the turn of the moon, Viserion's presence had redrawn charts of fear. Reach lords demanded fresh walls for Old Town's high tower. The Iron Bank speculated on wildfire futures. Red priests in Volantis proclaimed the dragon a herald of the Lord of Light. Even in the far north, Tormund Giantsbane claimed to see a gold star blazing south each dusk. He toasted the omen with fermented goat's milk and told his raiders that man's walls mattered little when the sky itself burned. Night fell pale on the wall. Lord Commander Jeor Mormont stood upon the icy rampart, ravens swirling, as Jon Snow pointed to a faint crimson wink far, far in the southern heavens and said, "There, my lord." The old bear narrowed flinty eyes. "Aye, and have you seen what rides it?" Jon shook his head. "No rider, only flame." Behind them Samwell Tarly whispered that old Nan had once spoken of dragons so big their shadows drowned armies, and that perhaps the world would end not in cold but in fire. Mormont grunted. "One beast changes little here, but south it will change everything." He clasped Jon's shoulder. "Remember that." The day Bran slipped again into Viserion's senses, the dragon dreamed of a deep-minded presence before it woke. Hungry again and restless, Bran greeted the golden furnace gently, cautious of the beast's burgeoning wariness. Yet Viserion allowed the intrusion, perhaps recognizing somewhere the echo of that first wild flight. Bran guided the dragon northward this time, along storm-spattered coasts. They skimmed whitecaps, scattering pods of orcus. They traced gull-spattered cliffs of Massey's Hook. Each mile etched new shapes into Bran's map of the world, and each mile sloughed more innocence from him. He glimpsed fisherfolk starving in squalor, lords feasting on gilded boar, knights branding small folk who dared poach from crowned forests. The realm he had once imagined as a saga of valor revealed itself vein by mundane vein, beating with petty cruelty and unheralded kindness alike. One dusk, Bran angled Viserion inland toward the King's Road. He wanted the dragon to be seen by travelers, by Septon's marching retinues to Old Town, by the stray Baratheon outrider galloping north. Terror would gallop with them, sure, but so would stories. Bran needed stories, for stories were seeds that rooted deeper than banners. The dragon's shadow fanned across wheat fields. Plows stopped mid-furrow. Men fell to knees. Children screamed, then laughed as flame licked clouds high overhead, never touching soil. Bran's heart stung at their panic, yet he told himself mercy without demonstration would be scorned when true war came. Let them fear just enough to recall awe. But he misjudged one hamlet on the outskirts of Hayford. A hedge knight, sworn to House Brune yet drunk on foolish valor, loosed a quarrel from a tower ballisted damnably well aimed. The bolt speared Viserion's right flank behind the shoulder joint, not deep but enough to tear membrane and draw black-red blood. The dragon shrieked, a sound like hell's own bellows. Bran felt the pain bloom raw. Instinct surged, a tide of pure flame, and for 3 heartbeats Bran's will faltered beneath it. The dragon turned. Heat blossomed. Bran forced his mind between Fong and target, commanding hold as sternly as Hodder once had. Fire sprayed wide of the tower, scorching fields, but the knight and villagers fled unscathed. Viserion beat upward, wings ragged though still mighty. Bran guided the beast toward Blackwater Bay, where salt spray cooled fevered flesh. When the dragon finally roosted again on Dragonstone, Bran left him fretting but alive. He withdrew to his own body trembling. The three-eyed raven watched silently as Bran wept, not from pain, but from the awful weight of what almost happened. In dragons, the old voice rasped, rage sits closer to marrow than thought. You must be stone against that tide, or else tide drown thought. Bran pressed fists to his eyes and whispered that he understood. Yet he remembered the hot bloom of power and wondered whether any man living could truly command it. Meanwhile, King's Landing burrowed deeper into paranoia. Robert decreed every smith within 10 leagues produce scorpion bolts day and night. He secretly invited the Alchemists' Guild to brew double its usual wildfire stores. If Cersei sought to control the flames, he, by gods, would drown her in them first. Yet each desperate measure only reminded the city of impotence. In taverns they whispered of the Dragon Boy, a mage no older than Prince Tommen who rode beasts with his mind. Children played games in muddy courtyards, one pretending to roar fire while the others capered like crawling Lannisters. Cersei found fresh opportunity. She summoned the Faith's High Septon, draped him in chains of lapis and jade, and in the September of Baelor staged a sermon condemning false dragons as demons wearing bygone flesh to deceive. The High Septon, who loved both coin and spectacle, proclaimed that should the creature return to the city, the warrior himself would smite its wings from the sky. Pilgrims cheered, Septas wept. Later that night, Cersei arranged quiet donations to several gilded cells and ordered spies to trace every black-beaked raven leaving Maester's chambers. Tyrion quipped that his sister was milking the dragon's teat harder than she ever milked Robert's treasury. Cersei only smiled, thinking of wildfire casks moved where Tyrion did not look. Yet some small folk found devotion in the beast. At Maidenpool, a bald beggar claimed the dragon's passing healed a palsy in his arm. At Duskendale, a woman swore Viserion's roar drove grayscale from her child's cheek. Within weeks, a minor cult bloomed in Flea Bottom. Acolytes painted half their faces gold and lit braziers under moonlight, chanting prayers to the winged phoenix. Eunuchs dressed as clergy tried to disperse them. The acolytes returned each dusk, bearing laurel wreaths of hammered tin and singing verses half-cribbed from old Valyrian scrolls and half-invented. When a gold-cloak's baton cracked open a zealot's skull one night, the mob surged, and 10 men died before dawn. Varys knelt beside the bloodstains later and sighed that dragons bred faith as swiftly as fear. On Dragonstone, Viserion's wound festered while storms lashed the isle. Bran felt the infection gnaw like ice. He tried guiding gulls into the wound, instructing them to pick rotting flesh, but gulls feared torch-scale heat. So Bran warged a clutch of island cats. Their tongues lapped at blackened blood until grease spattered their whiskers. Still fever charred the dragon's breath. When even Bran's best efforts failed, he realized he must seek human hands. But to whom could he entrust a secret dragon? The maesters would bleed it with leeches and send scrolls to their citadel. The king would mount its skull above the Iron Throne. Daenerys, perhaps, but her suspicion would flicker wrathful bright if her lost child returned bearing stranger scent. At last Bran's thoughts alit on the only man he believed would honor both dragon and realm. Maester Aemon Targaryen, frail and blind though he was, still bound to the Night's Watch atop the wall. The distance was vast, northwards across winter rivers and broken keeps, but dragons had crossed oceans. He would fly. He prepared Viserion at dawn. The dragon's flank oozed dark ichor, yet wings still unfurled like molten banners. Bran slid into the furnace mind and promised. Quiet, reassuring that relief lay north. They launched into driving rain. Lightning braided the sky. Thunder boomed. Clouds swallowed them whole. Bran channeled every ounce of greenseer focus, weaving between squall and roosting thunderhead. A single misjudged gust might doom them to the shivering sea. Below, fishermen glimpsed a comet of gold-cleaving storm clouds and prayed they had not angered drowned gods. In White Harbor, longshoremen scattered as shadow engulfed the docks. Lady Manderly dispatched ravens to Winterfell reporting the king's monster fleeing north. By the hour Bran crossed snow-patched forests, the dragon's blood freezing to black ridges upon membrane. Wind screamed so hard Bran thought his ears would burst. His human shell bled from nose though his spirit soared. Atop the wall the Black Brothers were finishing dawn muster when the storm drake burst through cloud. Ravens exploded from parapets. Waterfalls of ice shards cascaded from the battlements struck by wing beats. Jon Snow, newly promoted steward to Lord Commander, dropped the leather harness he carried and stared as if at a waking dream. Viserion landed on the stretch of Kingsgate walkway, stone groaning beneath talons. Frost steamed against inner furnace. Bran wrestled hunger, guiding jaws away from the cowering men. Jeor Mormont stood unflinching. The old bear's eyes reflected flames yet held steady. "Who comes?" he called above the wind. Bran used Viserion's throat to utter a low rumble. Not speech, but not mere roar either. Jon stepped forward, hand on Longclaw's hilt, though he knew 100 Valyrian blades could not harm this creature. "I know this beast," he murmured oddly, and Viserion's eyes, Bran's borrowed eyes, met Jon's. Recognition passed between brothers, though neither could name it. "I bear a wounded wing," Bran forced through the dragon's voice. A sound like gravel poured over a furnace grate. The brothers flinched. "I seek Maester Aemon." The words tasted molten. Scales thrummed with each syllable. Yet the message delivered. They led the dragon forward. Garrison yards emptied. Men pressed backs to towers. Crossbows tilted yet were not loosed. Maester Aemon stood upon a carriage drawn by 4 men through swirling snow. Blind eyes lifted to the smell of sulfur and salt. "Young eyes, old fire," the maester whispered, tears freezing on his cheeks. "Viserion." He approached unfaltering, palm outstretched. Bran bent the dragon's head low. The old man's fingers hovered inches above scorching scale, and Bran withdrew heat just enough. "There is rot inside you, child," Aemon murmured. "But fire is life too. We will bleed it out." They erected scaffolds along the scaled flank. Samwell Tarly directed Black Brothers to boil wine with herbs while Pipar located the largest needles from the infirmary. Needles broke against leathern hide until Benjen Stark arrived bearing dragonglass daggers found near the fist of the first men. The obsidian slid through scale like fish through water, and dark pus vented. Viserion howled but held still under Bran's mental grip while brothers scrambled, pale and sweating, to catch foul discharge in buckets. All day they worked, packing honey-soaked linen into the wound, pouring scalding liquor to cauterize corrupted blood. When they finished, dusk fell purple across the wall. Viserion lay curled, breath rising in plumes, but the fever slackened. Bran released the dragon to doze. He abandoned the beast's mind and awoke in his crippled body miles away, chest heaving as though he'd marched the whole distance. The three-eyed raven, waiting, observed the tremor in Bran's limbs. "You drag fate behind you like nets on a trawler," he intoned. "The more you haul, the heavier your debt when storms rise." Bran wiped sweat from his brow. "I saved him. For now." The old voice softened. "Good. Remember the taste of mercy. You will need it when choices sharpen." For 2 weeks Viserion recuperated within the wall's shadow. Brothers built a crude paddock near the old abandoned villages, stacking snow blocks as barriers, though no barrier could truly bind a dragon. Viserion remained, perhaps grateful, perhaps curious, perhaps tethered by Bran's nightly watch. Bran flew each dusk, guiding hunts across the haunted forest, letting the beast feast on elk fattened by summer. He glimpsed white shapes moving beyond the treeline, dead things rising in twos now instead of ones. At their head rode a figure pale and crowned with ice. Bran avoided them, though the dragon's fire yearned to test undead flesh. Jon Snow tended the dragon when off duty, surprising even himself with calm. He spoke softly as he had once to Ghost. Viserion listened, heat shimmering between them. One night Jon pressed a palm to the dragon's scarred flank and felt the dull thunder of its heart. In that beat he recognized some echo of his own restlessness, some need to belong yet stand apart. When he later wrote a letter to Robb at Winterfell, He left the tales of dragons unscribed. Robb would never believe him, and besides, some secrets felt holy. Maester Aemon's letters spoke otherwise. He penned a missive to Old Town, though he doubted the maesters would heed his call, warning that the Song of Ice and Fire had leapt one measure nearer crescendo. He sealed it with black wax impressed with the Night's Watch sigil and gave it to the swiftest raven. The bird vanished south over frost seas, burdened by words heavier than iron. Not all crows welcomed their fire-forged guest. Ser Alliser Thorne called the beast a Targaryen curse and snarled that it brought only doom. After a night of heavy ale, he tried to spear Viserion's flank. The dragon flicked his tail and snapped Thorne's spear like a willow wand, singeing the knight's beard for good measure. Thorne waddled away, stubble smoking, to raucous laughter of recruits. Yet mutters festered. Some feared the dragon might melt the wall itself, freeing wildlings by the horde. Jeor Mormont held council after council, balancing awe against peril. In the end, he resolved that as long as the creature did not breach discipline, it would remain an honored, if unsettling, guest. But a beast the size of a keep cannot remain hidden forever. Soon ravens left Eastwatch bearing tidings to White Harbor, and from there to King's Landing. By the time the news reached the small council, Cersei's hairs prickled with equal parts dread and opportunity. "The beast is wounded," Lord Varys droned silkily, "and roosts beneath our enemies' noses. Were one daring enough, it could be captured or slain, and the realm made safe." Robert guffawed that he'd ride north that very morrow, spear in hand. Renly rolled eyes. Pycelle coughed. Littlefinger smiled like a man whose dice had just shown dragons. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys received contradictory tales. One ship heard of a gold drake healing among black-clad crows. Another swore the beast roamed the frozen edges of the world. Ser Jorah urged caution. Dragons that far north seemed madness. But Dany's heartbeat answered each rumor with accelerating rhythm. One sunset she climbed the pyramid's terrace and laid her brow against Drogon's neck, whispering, "Find your brother." Drogon snorted flame that curled into a shape half like a wolf's head, half like a three-eyed bird. Kaith, masked and silent, watched from shadows and said only, "The door you opened cannot be shut, child of dragons." Dany shivered though the night was warm. By the third week of convalescence, Viserion's wound closed clean. Bran felt strength coil anew in muscle and wing, coil like a spring wound tight by destiny's hand. The dragon's restless pacing told Bran it was time to leave. But leave for where? South lay suspicion, wildfire, and Lannister snares. East lay a mother's wrath and the tangle of Slaver's Bay. North lay white mists and a threat older than dragons. Bran sat in the mindscape between choices and saw threads converge. White walkers breaching the wall. Viserion's flame turning undead to steam. Daenerys mistaking dragon rider Warg for thief and unleashing Drogon's fury. Cersei capturing Viserion and forging terror into crown. The realm dissolving in flame and snow. He realized then that his flight to King's Landing had been only the first move in a game whose board encompassed centuries. He returned to the dragon paddock and addressed Jon Snow while snowflakes ghosted their hair. "You must trust me," Bran said through Viserion's growl. Jon nodded though confusion creased his brow. Bran told him to open the paddock gates. Jon complied without question. Brothers watched wide-eyed as the great beast stepped beyond. Bran lifted into the sky once more. He turned Viserion's nose east, toward the heart of winter. It was madness perhaps, but winter itself was madness made flesh. Fire must meet cold where cold was strongest, else all else crumbled. And perhaps, Bran dared hope. One day the true mother of dragons would feel his flame upon the wind and follow willingly, not in wrath. They soared above Frostfang peaks shimmering in aurora, above ice rivers fractured like mirror shards, above shadows that moved not with the sun, but with some deeper malevolent will. Bran felt the Night King's gaze brush them once, a caress of death. Viserion shrieked defiance, white vapor cracking in sub-zero air. Far below, a legion of the doomed stirred, their ranks glittering blue like stars in a midnight sea. The war of dawn and dusk, ice and flame, had always been more dream than prophecy. until now. Bran's breath hitched with terror and wonder. He whispered silently to the weirwood roots that threaded every land. "I am coming. We are coming." The world tilted. In Winterfell's Godswood, the red leaves rustled though no wind blew. Arya, practicing water dancer steps nearby, paused as if hearing distant thunder. In Sunspear, Quentyn Martell, poring over parchments of dragonbone, felt a prickling across his shoulders. On Dragonstone, Melisandre stared into a brazier and saw a shadow of ice crowned in flame streak across a storm-lit sky. In Meereen, Daenerys clutched the parapet so hard her knuckles blanched. She knew the taste of that flame now. Hers, yet not hers, betrayed and begging at once. The dance of dragons, thought Bran, would not begin in city streets or upon open sea, but in the frozen throat of the world where no human song held sway. He braced himself, guiding Viserion across a horizon smeared violet with coming dawn. In the east, Regal bellowed across desert night, sensing kin. In the south, Cersei ordered fresh wildfire barrels rolled beneath the September's tunnels. In the north, Jon Snow marshaled rangers, hearts blazing with purpose not yet spoken. And in the cave of ancient roots, the three-eyed raven bowed his desiccated head, whispering in a language older than man, praising and mourning simultaneously. For the weft was woven. The loom now raced toward pattern's end, and every wing beat drummed the cadence faster. Bran did not know if the world would survive what came. He only knew that the sky between stars felt very large, and in that vastness the sound of dragon wings could drown the screams of 1,000 dead, could drown even the cries of a boy who once fell from a tower and learned to fly in dreams. So he flew into the bitter womb of winter, bearing fire enough to birth a dawn, or scorch the islands of men to soot. And somewhere in the dark he felt eyes upon him, blue as glacier hearts, green as weirwood blood, violet as the last girl queen of old Valyria, each waiting to see whether Bran Stark would steer destiny's furnace or be burned to cinders within it. Snow fell in whirls so fine they looked like drifting sparks against the night, a quiet blizzard dancing around the furnace-gold silhouette of Viserion as he beat northward. Bran rode inside that mind of scale and thunder, the boy's frail body still a continent away in the Cave of Roots, yet every gust burned his lungs as though he flew flesh and blood through the lethal cold. Below, the world lay fractured under winter's teeth. Valleys seamed by frozen rivers, peaks crowned in moonlit hoarfrost, forests petrified into black lace. Where cracks split the ice, he glimpsed the bitter shimmer of dark water, numinous, empty, merciless. No fire flickered on those plains. No farmstead scattered lamplight onto snow. This was the country of dead things, and the dead did not warm themselves. The dragon's wings thundered, lofting them past curtains of sleet. With every mile Bran felt the wound in the beast's flank tighten, sinew healing around dark obsidian stitches tied by Night's Watch hands. It pained Viserion to fly, yet that pain sharpened him. The dragon's mind hummed like a drawn bowstring. Bran matched the cadence, threading his own will through feral instinct. Steady, steady, let the wind lift us. There, catch the rising current. Yes, even now the miracle of it startled him. In childhood he had only dreamed of knights on coursers. Now he soared astride a creature older than any wall men had ever built. He sensed the change before he saw it. An emptiness in the air, a hush that devoured sound. The northern lights snuffed out behind a curtain of nothing. Bran guided Viserion higher, above the shroud, until clouds parted and the land fell away like the hull of a broken world. Beyond the frostfangs, the earth dropped into a plain scoured flat by centuries of screaming wind. At its center sprawled a vast shadow, a fortress-shaped void in the shape of a cracked crown. No battlements rose, no torches marked walls, yet Bran knew, by the dread that crawled along every nerve, he had reached the heart of winter. The Night King's seat. Viserion's chest rumbled, a tremor of remembered agony when the bolt had pierced his hide. Bran soothed him, "Not yet. We only watch," and watch they did, circling wide. Beneath them the snow parted in unnatural whirlpools, revealing ranks of figures arrayed like chessmen carved from blue-lit ice. Thousands, tens of thousands, dead men in furs, dead giants bound in frozen shackles of sinew, dead mammoths ringed by spectral mist. They stood motionless, weapons clenched, pupils shining sapphire. A war that might one day move, but not without its king's command. And there he was. In the crater's center rose a twisted monolith of black crystal, the dragonglass spire. Upon its uppermost crag stood the Night King, cloak of rime whipping in a wind that touched nothing else. His eyes glowed twin beacons of malignant promise. He did not look up at first. Bran wondered if even such power might miss the faint beat of dragon wings in storm. Then the Night King raised an arm, slow, unhurried, palm open to invisible sky. Bran felt the gesture like a wire pulled tight across his heart. Viserion screamed. Pain lanced from claw to wingtip, a howl of soul-deep violation. Blue flame cracked along the ruins cape below, thin cords of sorcery snapping outward from the spire, searching, demanding. Bran's consciousness slammed against an unseen wall of will. The Night King was reaching for the beast's mind, icy fingers sliding along the channels Bran himself occupied. Dragon and Greenseer reeled as one. Bran saw through borrowed eyes a memory not his own. Viserion chained upon the sands of Meereen, men driving spears to pen him, helpless to fire. Then another vision, future not yet written, scales bleaching pale blue, wings bearing frost instead of flame. No, Bran locked every shred of focus into the dragon's heartlight. He pulled Viserion up, wings beating at air that refused purchase, as though gravity itself had grown claws. Sparks of frost erupted across golden scales. Each spark sizzled, threatening to dull molten eyes into cerulean mirrors. Bran pictured the god's wood of Winterfell, the red leaves, the carved face, the sound of wind in summer. He built that memory into a wall, a living fortress of oak and rowan. Through it pulsed summer's heartbeat, Hodder's laugh, Arya's shout, Jon's quiet oath. The dragon's furnace flared brighter, fed by these mortal sparks, and the frost shattered like brittle glass. Viserion wheeled, banking so hard Bran felt clouds shear around them. They fled south, the Night King's magic snapping behind like a whip. Bran dared one look back. The icy monarch still stood upon his spire, head tilted, as though considering a puzzle newly presented. No pursuit followed. The army did not stir. The Night King had probed, measured, and, for now, let the prey escape. That knowledge chilled Bran more than any wind. The enemy had patience in infinite supply. They dove toward the Bay of Seals. Frozen salt spray shattered against the dragon's snout, turning instantly to rime. Bran urged him lower, hugging the cliff line, out of sight of moon and aurora. Dawn's first gray hint bled across the horizon when at last they spotted faint firelight. The wildling camp Tormund Giantsbane had claimed among ancient stone rings. Hunters shuffled around peat fires, gaunt faces flicking orange in gloom. They scrambled as Viserion descended, but Bran kept the dragon at the periphery, wings fanning up plumes of powdery snow. When Tormund himself emerged, hair like a frosted torch, he stared with that peculiar mix of terror and delight men reserve for miracles. "Boy," Tormund shouted into the hush, "if there's a man in that lizard, come out and parley before my heart bursts." Bran could not step free of the beast. His crippled body lay too far away, but he folded a greeting into Viserion's posture. Neck bowed, wings partly furled, tail coiled so talons pointed down. Non-threatening, as much as any 60-foot monarch of flame could manage. He tried speech once more, shaping rough words with the dragon's throat. "Friend, Night King rising." The air trembled with the guttural resonance, but the meaning scraped through. Tormund's eyes widened. "Ye sayin' you saw him?" The big wildling hollered. The dragon rumbled. Tormund spat into snow. "Then we're all dead men if we don't stand together, crows and free folk alike." He waved torchlight at his companions. "Pack, tell the Lord Crow." Runners peeled off toward the frostbound forest, bound for Eastwatch and the Wall. Bran banked away. Time weighed like a millstone. The world below him had once felt unbreakable, each castle, each liege bond, each river boundary like iron lines on a map. Now everything seemed made of spun sugar, trembling at the edge of heat. One spark and the sweet lattice would melt, washing kingdoms into shapeless ruin. At Castle Black, Jon Snow studied Maester Aemon's raven-inked scroll for the 10th time, palms sweating despite the deep freeze. The old Maester had written of Viserion's convalescence, of a mind speaking through dragon lips, and of dread portents glimpsed in flame. Jon believed every word. He had touched that golden scale, felt the pulse of unimaginable fire. He had looked into eyes that were Bran's yet not Bran's. And so when the runners from Tormund arrived babbling of an audience with the Night King himself, Jon did not doubt. He dispatched Ser Dennis Mallister to ride to Winterfell with tidings. They needed more dragonglass, more men, more everything. He pressed the parchment into Mallister's gauntlet hand. "Ride hard," Jon warned. "If you meet trouble, burn it. No half measures." Before dawn, Jon climbed the wall and stared north until Sledgrit wind peeled tears from his cheeks. Somewhere out there, his little brother danced on dragon wings, and a monster carved from winter's first breath watched, planning. Jon had sworn vows to defend the realms of men. He had never imagined he would do so alongside a beast of Valyria. But vows were like swords, forged for one war, repurposed by the next. Far south beneath a ruby sunrise, Asha Greyjoy's longship final rites knifed through the narrow sea, sail emblazoned with the kraken of pike. Her unlikely passenger, Daenerys Targaryen, stood at prow, silver-blonde hair streaming like a banner. She had exchanged her Dothraki riding leathers for a quilted jacket of black wool and bleached kraken hide, a token of alliance with the Ironborn. Yet around her neck she still wore the small chained amethyst that had once belonged to her brother Rhaegar. Inside her chest, the absence of Viserion throbbed like phantom limb pain. Each day without him reminded her that destiny could be stolen, that prophecy did not guarantee possession. Drogon circled above the mast, vast as a drifting leviathan, regal following like a green moon to his crimson planet. Ironborn gawked, terrified yet exultant. The dragonfire they carried offered no comfort against northern winter, but it promised something greater. Fear, the only coin kings respected. Asha sidled up beside the Targaryen queen. "If truth be told, Silverhead, I'd rather raid Lannisport than freeze my tits off beyond some magic wall." Dany's violet eyes did not leave the horizon. "When the north is secure, the west may come." Asha snorted. "Aye, that's a queen's tongue." She spat into the whaleskin sea. "But see you leave me a bone or two." Dany offered half a smile, the wind whipping color into her cheeks. Soon Viserion, she thought, like a prayer. Hold on. In King's Landing, the small council argued itself raw. Lord Robert sat slumped, hungover, while Pycelle droned of provisioning. Littlefinger spoke of loans, and Cersei paced, wine goblet clutched like a dirk, demanding greater stores of wildfire from the Guild of Alchemists. Varys listened, fingers laced in sleeves, while eyes weighed each lie. Rumor said the girl queen was already at sea. Rumor said she carried 2 dragons. Rumor said a third, wild as storm, had thrown in with northern traders. The realm trembled on rumor's blade. Tyrion proposed sending envoys to Dragonstone to treat with the beast's custodian, whoever he might be. Cersei snarled that cowards treat. Lions hunt. Robert crushed his empty flagon and grunted, "Just tell me which arse to kick." The council parted without answer. Later, Tyrion joined Varys upon the ramparts. Below them, teams of masons fortified scorpion nests overlooking Blackwater Bay. "Do you think the queen will come by sea?" Tyrion mused. "If she seeks to avoid desertion among Westerosi lords, landing on Dragonstone would grant leverage," Varys replied, voice a soft chiming of bells. "But the dragons will fly where they please, and wings do not heed tides." Tyrion drummed stubby fingers on stone. "Unless another has tamed our stray." Varys's smile barely moved. "A stray dragon tamed by a stray boy, perhaps? Stranger things roam our alleys, my lord." Tyrion snorted. Everything worth believing in these days seems stranger than fiction. He gazed north, beyond towers, beyond plains, beyond all he'd ever known. Winter has a cruel sense of artistry. It paints the canvas, then lights it on fire. The night after their escape from the heart of winter, Bran roused Viserion into the sky again. This time he flew intercept patterns over the land between the Wall and the Bay of Seals, hunting white patrols. They found their first pack at the edge of a dried riverbed. A dozen corpses clad in cracked mail, led by a tall white with twisted antlers grown through its skull. Bran swooped low, unleashing a gout of fire that roared blue-white in the night air. Dragon flame burned hotter in deep cold, he learned. Corpses erupted like pyres. Ice cracked, wind shrieked, ash spattered. Where flame touched antler white, bone powdered into embers. The threat ended in seconds, but Viserion's blood sang, hunger far from sated. Bran pulled the dragon upward, afraid passion might surge beyond restraint. This, he realized, would be their war. Not great battles under banners, but 1,000 small skirmishes up and down the teeth of winter, holding the dead at bay until the living could muster courage. And yet each time Viserion scorched a patrol, Bran felt the Night King's gaze tug across distance, mapping strength, shaping counters. 2 nights later that counter came. Bran spied a column of dead lumbering through a gulch and dove, confident flame would cull them. But as Viserion opened his jaws, an obsidian spear of ice streaked upward, hurled, not by brute arm but by sorcery. The javelin ripped across the wounded membrane of the dragon's right wing, tearing new holes, then shattered against collarbone. Agony convulsed the beast. They plunged, tumbling, wings flailing. Bran screamed inside a throat that spat only fire. He fought to level the descent. Talons gouged the frozen gulch. Snow exploded. Bones shattered among the whites as the dragon's bulk crushed them. When silence settled, Viserion lay trembling, blood oozing fresh crimson across moonlit snow. Bran's vision blurred. He pushed with every nerve, raising the dragon's neck to scan the ridges. There upon the crest stood a figure with no face, just a carven mask of frozen tears. A lesser other, yet the power thrummed like frost lightning in its palm, shaping the next spear. Bran did not wait. He marshaled flame, despite Viserion's pain, and blasted the ridge. Ice cracked, stone screamed, and the frosty sorcerer vanished in a whirlwind of steam. Yet more shapes gathered beyond, silhouettes too tall, too straight. The whites pressed, icy eyes popping like candles in wind whenever stray embers reached them, but still they came. Viserion lurched upright. Bran curled their tail and flung bodies aside, clawing free of the gulch. With one wing chewed, flight was agony, but still possible. They clawed skyward, leaving black plumes swirling over the killing ground. Bran's pulse hammered. Twice now the Night King's servants had tested him. Next time they would not miss. Back in the cave, the three-eyed raven fed thin branches to a guttering fire. The old sorcerer's body looked smaller than ever, his cloak of feathers sagging like dead leaves from a vine. "You see now," he said as Bran's consciousness sank into crippled flesh, "how winter learns from each defeat. You teach it every time you strike." Bran's voice cracked. "Then what would you have me do? Let them march south unchallenged?" A thin smile wrinkled the raven's lips. "I would have you forge a blade sharper than their ice. Flame alone will not suffice. You must be the whetstone." Bran wanted to rail, but the voices of 1,000 ravens filled his skull, warbling judgment, ancient, patient. He closed his eyes. Somewhere far off, Viserion settled on a cliff ledge, nursing torn membrane. Bran sent reassurance down that golden bond. "Rest, heal, I will return." Days passed. Raventide watchers reported more whites near Eastwatch. Hardhome survivors drifted south, whispering of a blue storm devouring the sea. Jon Snow redoubled drills, had flensing knives dipped in dragonglass, ordered torches soaked in pitch. He wrote letter after letter begging Winterfell, White Harbor, even the Eyrie for men. Stannis Baratheon, garrisoned at Winterfell after taking it from Ironborn, dispatched a terse reply, marching provisions scarce. "Hold the wall. The realm shall owe you. Jon ground his teeth and kept preparing. One dawn, as light bled rose across the wall, a clarion roar shattered the stillness. Not Viserion, this bellow boomed deeper, wilder. Jon rushed to the western parapet. Two titans circled high. Drogon licked sunlight like molten iron. Regal shimmered jade. Beneath them, at the Molestown clearing, rode a host of iron-born warships cracked into sledges and dragged ashore by hundreds of reavers. And at their center, tall and pale and terrible in black wool, stood Daenerys Targaryen, braids flickering silver in dawn wind. Jon descended the steps 2 at a time. The courtyard seethed with brothers, weapons half-drawn. He stepped forward, cloak snapping, meeting violet eyes across the churn. She inclined her head, a queen acknowledging equal, then spoke. "I seek my child and war in equal measure, Lord Commander. Show me where the night is darkest." Her voice carried a note of steel that echoed along every corridor of Jon's memory. He found breath at last. "Your child heals north of here, and the night." He gestured beyond the wall's crest, where the sky mottled bruise and indigo. "The night waits for us all." Later, in the armored gloom of Lord Commander's solar, they met again. Meltwater dripped from Drogon's scales outside, hissing where it fell. Elapon snow. Ghost lay near the hearth, eyes never leaving the Targaryen queen. Jon unrolled maps scarred by frost and ink. Asha Greyjoy lounged against a beam, sharpening an axe. Ser Davos Seaworth had arrived with Stannis' token guard and now stood behind Jon, one hand absently fingering his pouch of fingerbones. Daenerys traced the map's northern edge. "The boy who rides Viserion, he is Starkborn, you say?" Jon nodded. "My brother Bran." Davos exhaled low. "Dragon-riding Starks," he muttered. "Never thought I'd see that line in the ledger." Dany's brow nodded. "Then your house is bound to dragons by blood and by fate. We must speak with him." Jon shook his head. "He is far beyond the wall now. Even Viserion barely surmounts the heart when magic presses back." Dany's gaze sharpened. "Magic bends to those who command it." Asha snorted. "Aye, and stones bend to my axe if I swing long enough. Doesn't make it wise." Jon laid a finger on the map. "The Night King mustered here, at the Frostfang crater. If Bran is right, he gathers sorcerers who can wound dragons. We cannot simply fly into his maw." He met her eyes. "But we can strike his spear arms. The lesser others who cast those ice javelins, will hunt them." Dany considered. "My children can scour them from sky, and my rangers will harry from ground," Jon added. "It won't end him, but it may buy time. Time for Bran to return, time to rally the South." Davos coughed. "Begging your pardons, but the South does not but bicker. Stannis holds Winterfell hungry as a bear. The Lannisters still rule King's Landing, and word is Renly's ghost roams Storm's End stirring rebellion." Asha flicked her axe. "Let lions chew their own tails. Winter cares not which sigil bleeds first." Daenerys's voice dropped. "When cold swallows fire, every banner burns." She placed a hand on the map's white waste. "We will strike tonight." At dusk, Bran found sanctuary in the hollow trunk of a colossal weirwood near the Ven Valley. He had paused Viserion's march to rest the torn wing, urging the dragon into a canyon warmed by hidden hot springs. Steam coiled around golden scales. Blood slowed. Bran drifted toward sleep, his spirit hovering between dreams. Then a whisper threaded the roots. "Come home." It was not the raven's voice, nor any voice alive. It was the timber itself, the tree speaking. Bran saw Winterfell in his mind's eye, halls lit by hearths, faces long unseen calling him inward. Rickon's laugh, Robb's steady smirk, even Father's stern warmth. Soon, he promised, but the roots quivered now. Branches rustled though no wind moved. The face carved in bark wept scarlet sap. Bran understood sudden terror. If he did not return, if he died beyond the wall, he would never pass his knowledge to any mortal. The trees might carry memory, but memories without voices were brittle. He woke Viserion gently. The dragon rose, snow shaken from carmine steam, and with a slow beat of wings they soared south again. Bran set course for the wall, guided by faint emberglow where Drogon's watchfires flickered. Night blanket deep enfolded castle black. Beyond the gate Jon Snow assembled his ranging. Ghost padded at his side. Asha's Ironborn clanked in black mail. Wildlings under Tormund hoisted crude shields. Torches spotted the snowfield like sparks on coal. Above, Drogon and Regal circled, silhouettes against a star-washed vault. Daenerys climbed the ice switchback to the wall's crest. Frost crunched under her boots. She gazed into the pine-dark ocean of the haunted forest, every branch spangled with horror. She felt hair lift on her neck. Dragons were bound to her blood. Still she sensed another presence, golden and wounded, moving nearer. She closed her eyes and reached inward, remembering the warmth of eggs beneath running water, the crack of shells, the first shrill cries. Viserion, she whispered into the dark, and far away, above towering pines, Viserion's head jerked. Bran felt the summons ripple through the dragon's heart, the call of the true mother. For a breath Bran hesitated. If he yielded now, Daenerys might rip the beast from him. Yet to refuse would fracture the fragile alliance he had labored to forge. He loosened his mental reins, just a fraction. Viserion trumpeted, banking south at doubled speed, the torn wings searing but functional. Jon snapped his gaze skyward. A star falling? No, gold fire blazing, winged, descending. Daenerys gasped. Drogon roared in recognition. Regal answered soft as thunder. The camp froze, hundreds of eyes tilting skyward. Then Bran guided Viserion into the torchlit clearing, landing with a shudder that cracked ice and sent snow billowing. Silence. Only steam hissed where dragon blood met snow. Daenerys descended the stair in measured steps, torchlight gilding her face. Bran held Viserion's head low. The queen reached out, palm trembling, and touched scorched scale just above the fresh tear. Her breath caught, as though she touched a lost child. Bran sensed her heart open like a gate, joy and fury swirling. She glanced at the wound, fury sharpening. "Who has hurt you?" she asked, voice ragged. Bran answered through Viserion's rumble. "The night hurts us all." Daenerys's pupils flared. "Who speaks?" Jon stepped forward. "My brother." Dany stared. "The crippled boy who fell?" "He learned to fly another way," Jon said softly. Bran coaxed Viserion's head aside and reached through the bond, projecting vision against the snow. Images of the Night King's spear, whites massing, frozen giants crashing gates. The queen's breath steamed pale in the air as each image flickered across the whiteness, painting prophecy in reverse. When it ended, she closed her eyes. "Then we ride at dawn," she whispered. Jon nodded. "Dawn may come too late." Bran withdrew from the dragon, leaving Viserion nuzzling Drogon's neck in exhausted reunion. He slipped into wolves nearby, guiding them as scouts. Through lupin eyes he watched men erect barricades, saw women sharpening dragonglass into arrowheads, heard wildlings singing low songs of sun returning. The pack's instincts comforted him, simple, honest. But beyond them pressed the enormity of dawn's coming war. While the living marshaled defenses, the dead prepared offense. In the heart of winter, the Night King strode through silent avenues of frost obelisks. He paused before the dragonglass spire where runes glowed faint as old moons. The spearsmiths labored here, other sorcerers shaping shards of eternally frozen water into barbed lances. Beside them, giant wights hauled coils of sinew and bone to fashion crude ballista frames, engines to hurl those spears skyward. The Night King watched, eyes cold as the void between stars. He lifted one nearly finished javelin, balanced it. The weapon hummed with alien music. In the reflection on its glassy surface he saw, faint, 3 dragons circling a vast white wall, their combined fire making sunrise in the dark. He saw a boy's face, eyes white, mouth slack, seer trapped inside the furnace. And he saw a queen bathed in red light, brandishing a sword whose steel he had once forged in mortal days long forgotten. The Night King turned the vision aside. He opened his palm. Frost flowers unfurled along the spear's shaft, petals of murder. He nodded once. The sorcerers resumed their silent industry. Dawn burned blue gold across the wall. Bran warged a dozen ravens, sending them across the forest to map white patrols. Jon took counsel with Daenerys and his captains. They decided on multiple strikes. Dragons sweeping northern ridges in flame arcs, while rangers raided ice forges rumored among the foothills. Asha and her Ironborn would guard Eastwatch's sea approach, launching fire-tipped quarrels at any dead things that floated south. The first arc of sun cleared the horizon. A horn blared 3 times. Trees beyond the wall quivered, not with wind, but with movement beneath the snow. Then they appeared, white shadows upon white ground, uncountable, marching in glacial cadence. Jon's heart stuttered. So many, so soon. Drogon shrieked. Viserion echoed. Regal harmonized, and all 3 leapt skyward. Snow spiraled under their wake. Torchbearers cheered as living dawn roared overhead. Bran rode Viserion but left the queen her place in the dragon's breast. He found rather a seat along the spine, guiding with subtle touches. Daenerys astride Drogon's sword beside them, hair whipping silver. She shouted words in Valyrian and Drogon answered with a torrent of fire that washed the forest top in molten gold. The leading ranks of whites ignited, bones popping. Regal veered left, where clusters of pale giants lumbered. His flame burst jade and saffron, baking snow to glass. Giants stumbled, crashed, shattered, but behind them new figures marched. The lesser others, elegant as icicles, each brandishing a spear that glittered unnatural blue. Bran felt Viserion's muscles coil, not in rage but in fear-tinged hunger. The memory of the wounded wings still flared. "We stay aloft," Bran urged. "Scour them from range." The dragon inhaled, throat glowing, and loosed a curtain of emerald flame. Several spear-bearers melted, leaving puddles that hissed steam. Yet one survived, cloak ablaze but eyes untouched, and sent his javelin spinning. Bran banked. The ice dart screamed by, missing. Drogon snarled and dove upon the spear-bearer, talons ripping, flame gouting. When the blaze cleared, nothing remained except a melted crater. Below, rangers surged from the gate, dragonglass axes flashing. Ghost bounded ahead, tearing into thigh sinew of a white knight. Jon led, longclaw radiant in morning glow. Every swipe shattered ice-coated bone. Every thrust severed sinew. Daenerys' unsullied fought alongside wildlings, Grey Worm at vanguard, shields clanging. Scream and flame interwove into a tapestry of living resistance. In the sky, the 3 dragons traced a triskelion of fire, converging again and again on clusters of white. The snowfield burned black, then glassy. Bran felt Viserion's heartbeat quicken, blood surging. Yet with each breath they spent, the dead replenished. From treeline to horizon new ranks marched, endless as tide. Among them rose shapes Bran had not seen. Wyverns wrought of bone and frost, wings membraned by translucent ice. They lurched into flight on gusts of unnatural wind, jaws leaking hoarfrost. Smaller than true dragons, yes, but numerous. The first ice wyvern struck Regal like a thrown spear. Its teeth clamped upon the green dragon's neck, pumping bitter cold. Regal bellowed, spiraling. Dany shouted something Bran could not catch, and Drogon banked to assist. Bran forced Viserion alongside. Together they tore the ice creature off, Viserion's talons ripping. Green fire consumed the wyvern, but more rose. Bran's mind flickered. 3 dragons against a sky of frost spawn? They would bleed by attrition. He saw alternative visions. His dragons shattered, the wall breached, the living retreating south in screaming dread. Another thread glimmered. Forest fire, wild and dangerous, but cleansing. The forest, Bran realized. He skimmed memories of weirwood rootways, of long dormant pockets of resin in pine stands. Flame fed by sap could spread quick as wind. Burn the dead's path, leave them no ground to tread. Bran swept southward, calling a warning to Drogon. Daenerys caught a fragment through inarticulate roar, eyes wide. Bran directed Viserion to strafe the snowy canopy, breathing a long, unbreaking sheet of fire across pine crowns. Trees exploded, sap hissing rocket-like. Flame spilled in a tsunami. Wind ate spark, carried ember miles. Snow flash evaporated to steam, then roared upward. A wall of living inferno rose between army and wall, high as the castle towers. Wyverns shrieked as heat hammered, wings icing mid-flap, bodies tumbling. For a breath Bran feared he had birthed second doom. Firestorm threatened defenders too, but the wind churned northward, drawing vacuum that sucked heat away from the wall. Flames leaned into the dead lines, consuming. Corpses cracked like kiln-fired clay. Icemen shriveled, spears drooping. Giants toppled in smoking ruin. The living coughed but held ground behind stone ramparts. The inferno's roar drowned screams, thunder, memory. And still Bran sensed the Night King beyond horizon, standing unmoved, simply observing. Flames might delay him, he knew, but they would not suffice. As the killer of summer birthed new storms, winter would conjure new counters. Yet the living had secured a moment, precious as any jewel. Time to breathe, to repair, to hope. By dusk the firelines smoldered, ash swirling around skeletal pines. Rangers retrieved wounded. Asha's Ironborn sang obscene sea hymns, half-mad with victory. Daenerys dismounted, rushing to Rhaegal's side as unsullied surgeons stitched tears with dragon gut. Drogon curled protectively around them. Bran guided Viserion to the courtyard of Eastwatch, bloodied but alive. Jon met him, cheeks soot-streaked, eyes fierce. Bran slipped from the dragon's mind, vision swimming. Jon caught him in arms. Bran's unused legs dangled like rag. "You did it," Jon breathed. Bran shook his head. "We delayed him. We'll need more than flame next time." Night fell starless. Fires burned in braziers along the wall. Bran sat in a wheeled chair fashioned by blacksmiths, awed by the simple gift of being present in his own skin. Daenerys approached, cloak dark as raven feathers, hair streaked with ash. She knelt. "You saved Viserion and us." Bran's gaze drifted to the dragons beyond the parapet. "He saved me first." Dany studied him, eyes glowing with candlelight reflection. "I once believed the world would bow because dragons do. Now I see dragons bow to something greater." Bran smiled crookedly. "To the living." She returned the curve, weary yet bright. "To the living." Jon joined, ghost at his heel. Together they looked north where the firestorm dying embers glimmered like a second dawn. Bran whispered, "This night we held the line." Jon nodded. "And tomorrow?" The young green seer inhaled the stink of smoke and frost. "Tomorrow we weave new lines," he murmured. "Threads braiding dragons and wolves and krakens and men, until winter breaks or the world does." Beyond hearing range, the three-eyed raven's voice drifted on a memory of wind. The weft tightens. Soon all knots draw together. And somewhere, far beyond ash and flame, the Night King fashioned a final spear from the heart of a star fallen ages past, its tip so cold it burned. Bran closed his eyes, feeling the loom of fate's shuttle whir. He would ride again and again until threads ran out or destinies aligned. For now, though, the line held. For now, children still dreamed beyond hearth fires. He slept, at last, beneath the sky that had once seemed too distant for a broken boy. A sky now filled with wings of promise and peril, fighting to keep daylight burning just one dawn more. Night settled over Eastwatch with an uneasy quiet, the kind that follows great violence only when the wounded are not yet dead enough to moan. Red embers glowed in braziers along the wall, and from the ramparts the wind carried a scorch sap scent that had no place in a land of ice. Bran Stark drifted between waking and warg dream, listening to Viserion's distant heartbeat as though it were the ticking of some enormous clock measuring out the future in molten seconds. Every few breaths the dragon twitched in sleep, wings flexing, nostrils flaring, and Bran felt the tug of healing muscles bind themselves around torn membrane. Outside the castle yards, Unsullied healers mixed boiled pine tar with powdered dragonglass to seal fractures no human surgeon had ever studied. The dragons dozed, and their shadows danced long across the snow, as if memory itself were shifting on enormous claws. Jon Snow found Bran alone beside a slit hole in the eastern tower wall, watching the sky. His cheeks were still spattered with soot, his black gambeson stiff with dried white ichor. He spoke softly, as one does beside a sickbed. "Can you feel him now?" Bran nodded without turning. "He dreams of flying north again. Even wounded, he's restless." He spared his brother a glance. "Like you." Jon's mouth flickered toward a smile, then sank into lines of worry. "Restless and reckless are not far apart." He leaned both hands on the stone sill. "When dawn breaks, we march. The fire bought us hours, maybe a day. After that," Bran finished for him, "the Night King will press until something gives." He closed his eyes, letting Raven's sight swirl through miles of dark. Burnt treetops crackling in the half-melt. Blackened carcasses of giants frozen mid-collapse. White walkers stalking the perimeter of the blaze, patient as cats studying a closed door. "He waits for the flames to starve," Bran whispered. "Cold will always starve fire if you feed it time." Jon exhaled a plume of frost. "Then we won't grant him time." He straightened. "Rest while you can. At first light, I ride for Winterfell to beg Stannis for every man he can spare. You'll take Daenerys?" "No. She flies south to rally Riverlords. Rhaegal still bleeds, and Drogon's wings can cover leagues quicker than any raven." He hesitated. "A wounded dragon can't outpace treachery." Bran knew he meant Cersei, and perhaps Stannis too. The battlefield north of the wall was only one front in a war that now spanned every river and road from Dorne to the Frostfangs. He reached for Jon's hand, awkward with the limpness he could not feel, and gripped forearm to forearm like warriors parting. "Keep your eyes open," Bran said. "Sometimes the enemy wears the face of a friend until the day ends." Jon gave the ghost of a nod, and Ghost, the direwolf, slunk from the gloom to fall in at his heel. Together they descended the stair, leaving Bran to the hush of drifting embers. At the same hour, Daenerys Targaryen stood on the ice-slick parapet above Eastwatch's gatehouse, her breath a silver veil, her thoughts a hurricane. The dragons were tethered in the courtyard. Tethered in mind only, for no chain could hold them. But she felt their weight all the same. Drogon dozed curled about the tower's base, tail coiling round scaffolds like living siege equipment. Rhaegal lay half beneath his brother's wing, hissing whenever cold seeped through the bandaged gash at his throat. And Viserion. A golden promise, a lost child returned but half-claimed, sleeping with head on folded claws, the torchlight painting his scales like braids of molten coin. She turned at the crunch of boots on rime. Grey Worm bowed stiffly. "Your Grace, the Unsullied stand ready. We hold the line while you fly." His voice was flat as always, but she heard the burden behind the words. The understanding that their spears were matchsticks beside the power of dragons, yet they would die gladly to buy her minutes. "Hold only until the Night King moves," she said. "Then fall back behind the wall. Fire can win the sky, but men must hold stone." She touched his shoulder, a rare gesture. Grey Worm's eyes, darker, older than his face, flickered acceptance. Asha Greyjoy scaled the parapet next, a jug of hot mead in one hand. "If we've got to freeze, might as well toast the moment." She drank, then offered the jug. Dany sipped. The burn tasted like Iron Island's peat and something saltier, fear disguised as bravery. Asha glanced over the dragons. "Your gold one's right wing looks like a split sail. Will he fly?" "He will," Dany answered. "Stubbornness runs in the blood." She hefted the jug back to the Ironborn. "And you? Will you stay and hold the coast?" Asha grinned, teeth white in torch glow. "My lads brought 6 scorpions from Pike, carved with kraken sigils. We'll see if ice bugs bleed." She turned away, whistling off-key the jug SL. Ushing amber. Left alone, Dany listened to the ocean grinding ice flows against the shore. She thought of a different coast half a world away, where once she had dreamt of conquering with her children at her flanks, kings and cities kneeling in wreckage. Now conquest seemed a trinket before a tide that cared nothing for thrones. She watched Viserion's chest rise and fall, slow, steady, and whispered in Valyrian, Zaldriz's Bazdari Ixos Daer, dragons are not slaves, yet every bond between them was a chain of the heart. She wondered if chains forged from love could shackle destiny itself. South of the wall, in Winterfell's great hall, Stannis Baratheon paced the stone floor like a starving wolf in a too-small cage. The hall still wore the scars of tandem sieges. Ironborn blades had nicked the dais. Bolton torches had scorched the rafters. Stannis's own engineers had braced cracked pillars with fresh pine that smelled incongruous amid cold granite. Every creak of timber reminded him that the seat he held was borrowed and perhaps trapped. Davos watched the king with sad eyes. Riders from Castle Black will arrive by nightfall, he ventured. Best to hear them clothed in warmth, not wearing out the stone. Stannis halted. When winter comes, a king's feet should blister before his people's. He pivoted to the long oak table, where maps sprawled beneath flickering candles. Ice demons, Davos. Dragons roused. A queen with foreign host. And still the lords of the North hedge oaths like gamblers at dice. He tapped a gaunt finger on White Harbor. Manderley's ravens speak of ships lost to fire on the shivering sea. He asks protection for his trade lanes. Another tap on Carhold. Karstark begs steel and grain. All think first of themselves. A man with an empty belly thinks only of bread, Davos said gently. Stannis's jaw clenched. Then let him eat loyalty. He looked up as the door banged wide. In strode Ser Dennis Mallister, hoarfrost glimmering on sable cloak. He bowed stiffly and presented a sealed parchment. From Lord Commander Snow, your grace. Stannis broke the seal. His shoulders tightened as he read. Details of the Fireline victory, of dragons wounded and dead replenishing ranks, of Bran Stark riding Gold Flame. Finally Jon's plea, send men. Send dragonglass. Send hope. Stannis lowered the parchment, brooding. The boy fought for us at Hard Home, Davos reminded. He stood the wall when others fled. He broke his vows by aiding a usurper queen. He keeps them by saving the living. Stannis's gaze flickered toward the hearth where the carved direwolf mantle stood half-burned. Prepare the knights. At first light we march. He turned to Mallister. Have the captured ironborn swine choose. Fight or freeze in chains. We need every blade. Mallister bowed again. As he left, Stannis muttered, If the gods name me king, let them crown me in battle. Davos touched his pouch of finger bones and prayed they would crown them all in survival instead. In the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister received news of Dragonflame obscuring half a northern forest with a composure so brittle it could cut glass. The council chamber stank of wildfire. Casks lined the walls like fat green soldiers awaiting orders. Qyburn gave his report, voice humming with ghoulish delight. Our sparrows in the citadel confirm draconic hide resists Valyrian steel but not a certain thickness of cold-hardened obsidian. He lifted a shard. Nor, perhaps, a bolt tipped in alchemist's concoctions. Cersei waved him silent. Spare me uncertain perhaps. She turned on the master of ships, no longer Paxter Redwine but a craven Tyrell cousin appointed mere weeks before. How long before the Scorpions ring the city walls? 6 weeks, your grace, with present labor, he stammered. But 3, she snapped. Whip the men if they lag. She studied Qyburn again. And give them reason not to lag. Tyrion lounged at the end of the table, swirling wine he did not intend to drink. 3 weeks may be moot if the Northern War spills south sooner. He aimed a lazy smile at his sister. Perhaps we might treat? Offer steel for dragon scales. Sell wildfire by the barrel. Cersei's smile was thinner than rice parchment. We will treat when they kneel. She rose. Send ravens to every marcher lord. Summon levies. If they balk, remind them the crown's coin buys bread. Her voice dripped honeyed threat. And famine. When the council dispersed, Tyrion lingered with Varys above the Serpentine steps. The spider's expression remained unreadable, but Tyrion saw worry in the flick of his fan. When lions stalk wildfire, Tyrion quipped, "The air grows thin." "Indeed," murmured Varys. "And when winter winds blow, the lion's mane catches flame astonishingly fast." He glanced to ensure no one listened. "There may come a moment when a wise dwarf chooses exile over immolation." Tyrion tipped his cup in salute. "If the sea still welcomes liars, I'll row the boat." He watched Qyburn's black robe vanish around a corner and felt something inside him coil, a serpent of foreboding colder than any northern wind. Beyond the stormlands, a streak of light tore across the night sky, bright enough that sailors on the stepstones crossed themselves. They thought it a comet, a sign of fortune or doom depending on which god they served. But in the heart of winter, the Night King felt the starfall strike the permafrost spire with a thunder too deep for ears. The crater bloomed into fractal wounds, then sealed as his will drew the shards together, glittering. From the shards he forged a spear taller than a mammoth, its head a splinter of celestial stone. The frostflower patterns hummed with cosmic cold. He tested the balance, then lofted it to the horizon where the wall crouched like prey. In that moment, Bran shivered awake inside the library tower of Eastwatch, heart pounding to a rhythm that was not his own. He tasted star metal on his tongue. He flung his mind outward, ripping through crow, through wolf, through dragon, chasing the echo of that forging, but it faded before he reached it, like a candle snuffed in an ocean. He gasped and toppled from the wheelchair. Pages of the Book of Endless Winter scattered across the planks. Gilly, who had been coaxing Sam's infant to sleep in the corner, rushed to help. "What's happened?" she whispered, gathering his shoulders. Bran's pupils snowed over white. He spoke in a voice deeper than his own. "The Night King holds a spear of the falling sky." His eyes cleared. "Sam. I need Sam." The steward arrived minutes later, robe askew, arms full of scrolls. Bran demanded histories of starfall metals, of Valyrian writings on celestial sorcery. Sam stammered, "We have fragments from the Jade Compendium, Umma's glyph translation maybe, and Maester Chelsted's treatise on blood metallurgy." "Bring them," Bran said. "We have to know if fire can melt a frozen star." 2 days passed in fevered preparation. Stannis' vanguard reached the wall at dawn of the third day, banners cracking, the fiery heart of the Lord of Light beside the crowned stag. Snow churned under cloven hooves of Carhold cavalry. Davos led rearguard supply wagons laden with dragonglass arrowheads. The convergence of armies turned Eastwatch's muddy lanes into a maze of tents, cookfires, latrines. Wildlings eyed Southrons with suspicion. Baratheon knights muttered prayers when passing free folk who wore bare pelts wet with gore. Yet a strange camaraderie flickered. All had seen the sky burn and knew the real enemy wore neither crown nor sigil. Daenerys departed at noon, Drogon and Rhaegal launching amid thunder of wings. Viserion, still flight-hobbled, remained. Bran would ride him northward when the spear-casting forges were located. She clasped Bran's hand before mounting Drogon. "Keep him safe," she said. Bran answered, "And find us allies south. The wall may hold the first blow, but not the last." She nodded once and soared into cloud. Jon Snow rode west for the King's Road with a company of rangers and Baratheon foot, bound for Winterfell to coordinate lines of retreat and grain caravans. At the gate, he turned to Bran. "If the wall falls, send ravens and stall them at the Dreadfort. I'll burn the bridge at the last river if I must." Bran only said, "Ride hard, brother." As Jon spurred away, Ghost loped at his flank like moonlit vengeance. Dust settled, leaving Bran amid the swirl. He wheeled toward the smithy where Stannis' armorers were fitting scorpion heads with dragonglass barbs under Maester Aemon's supervision. The old Maester's blind eyes followed sound. When Bran spoke, Aemon tilted his head, listening to future thunder. "Celestial stone," Bran murmured. "Harder than ice, colder than death. Can we chip it?" Aemon's voice cracked thin as parchment. "The dragon steel of legend, steel that drinks heat. Only the hottest hearth can soften it. Perhaps a dragon's breath, focused by Viserion channels. But who will stand close enough to strike? Bran answered simply, I will. And Viserion. The maester's blind gaze seemed to peer into distances invisible. Then may the gods, he whispered, old, new, and forgotten, wrap their arms around you, for none else can. Night again. The fireline they had ignited now smoldered in patches. Bran guided Viserion low across the scarred forest. Stannis' scouts had plotted 3 forges of the enemy, pits where white walkers shaped ice javelins, guarded by wyverns and wights. Each forge exuded cold visible as hazy auroras. Bran aimed for the nearest. They arrived beneath a sky of shards, northern lights fractured by wind and dove. Snow burst, white scrambled. Viserion's flame rolled in a continuous stream, emerald and violet, hotter than glass-making furnaces. The forge pit splintered, ice weapons shattered, molten edges exploding. Bran felt the Night King's mind flick toward them, a shark scenting blood miles away. He urged haste. Viserion clawed frozen ground, scattering fragments of half-shaped spears. They set each shard alight until nothing remained but muddy steam. As they rose, a ripple split the treeline. Half a dozen ice wyverns winging toward them, riders of frozen bone astride their shoulders. Bran counted distances, angles. Wounded wing would not outclimb enemies. He angled instead into a fall, corkscrewing, letting gravity sling them beneath the wyvern squad. At the last moment he flared wings, pain seared, and fanned upward behind the lead creature. Fire roared, catching skeletal ribs, traveling up rider and mount in one gout. The second wyvern snapped fangs at Viserion's tail. Bran banked, clipped its jaw with curled talons, and sent it tumbling earthward. But one rider soared above the tumble, spear gleaming sickening blue. Bran saw the throw before it launched. He rolled. The spear missed heart but grazed Viserion's flank, ice burning like acid. Bran screamed inside the dragon's roar. He snapped wings closed, dropped through cloud, then snapped them open again, fleeing south. The remaining wyverns pursued. Light blossomed beneath, orange-gold arcs, like sunrise in the night. Stannis' siege scorpions, hauled onto sledges by Karstark oxen, fired dragonglass bolts. One bolt punched through a wyvern's chest. Frozen blood burst like shattered diamonds. Another clipped a rider, sending him spinning. The pursuers broke formation, uncertain. Viserion landed behind the scorpion line, chest heaving lava-hot breath. Baratheon men gaped but held their ground. The wyverns hesitated, then beat northward, abandoning the field. Bran slumped against the dragon's neck. Pain licked through the graze, frostbite of the soul. Maester Aemon's counsel echoed, fire tempered by Viserion channels. Bran closed his eyes, focusing on the bond, urging blood to push warmth into the icy wound. Stannis rode up, sword drawn. His steed skittered at the dragon's heat. "We saw your signal," he called, voice like gravel. "Report." "Forge destroyed," Bran rasped. "2 remain." Stannis surveyed the night. "Then we strike the next before dawn. Show us the road." Bran wanted to rest, but time gnawed them. He mounted the wheeled harness, cobbled from ship ropes, and guided infantry east. Viserion limped behind, tail dragging gouges. The second forge lay abutting a frozen waterfall. Here ice smiths used falling water to quench blades in cold so pure it shimmered like clear glass. Bran led a pincer. Stannis' ranks advanced with torches and dragonglass maces while Viserion attacked from above. Flames met water. Steam billowed. White-foot soldiers lunged but found themselves crushed beneath mailed hooves. A single White Walker, a swordsman crowned with frost-carved fangs, waded into the fray, blade of blue fire spinning. Stannis himself engaged, Lightbringer flashing orange. They traded blows that hissed. Frost met flame. At last Lightbringer cleaved the ice blade. Molten shards splattered the walker's breast, and Stannis hacked downward, splitting ribcage. The walker shattered into a halo of powder. With its master undone, the forge stilled. But far north of the field, The Night King lifted his star-forged spear and began to march. Bran collapsed at dawn beside a burned stump, body convulsing from warg strain. Viserion's latest wound had clotted but not healed. Black ice veins spread along scales. Maester Aemon examined, hands trembling near flesh that smoked. "Dragon fire alone cannot purge such cold," he warned. "We must carve it out." So they did, on a hillock behind the wall. Unsullied healers heated dragonglass shards red-hot in braziers. Bran held Viserion's mind in a firm lull while Grey Worm, face set, plunged the glass into corrupted tissue and gouged. The dragon did not thrash. Bran bore the agony, teeth grinding until blood ran from his nose. When it was done, the wound steamed, cleansed. Aemon smeared salve brewed of hot springs herb and ash bark. Viserion breathed easier. Word reached them then. Jon Snow had returned, Winterfell's banners behind him, and with him marched Melisandre of Ass High, called south from the Shireen ashes to serve a prophecy reborn. Jon rode through Eastwatch's gate at dusk, armor dented, eyes burning with purpose. Ghost loped in, muzzle crusted with rime. Sansa Stark rode beside him wearing a cloak of snow-bear fur, her gaze steel. Rickon followed, grown taller, spear strapped to his back. Wolves among wolves. Their meeting in the hall ran long. Melisandre's red eyes swept Bran, lingering on the youth's milk-white pupils whenever he warged mid-sentence to confirm scout reports. She spoke of visions in flame, a spear of star ice piercing dragon heart, a boy between roots turning ice to steam. Stannis scoffed. Prophecy is a reader's trick. Only swords decide. Jon said nothing, but his hand rested on Longclaw's pommel like a promise. They devised the plan. 2 dragons fly at dawn to the final forge while ground forces fortify a kill zone before the wall. An alley of scorpions, dragonglass caltrops, and wildfire trenches. Should the Night King commit his host, they would draw him there and break him with fire from 3 dragons. Bran would remain on Viserion, circling above to strike any attempt at flanking. Melisandre would station herself atop the wall's central stair. Pyres of oily would stacked around, ready to summon flame should winter breach. It was a desperate lattice of hopes, its weave stretched thin, but no better tapestry could be spun. When quiet settled, Sansa approached Bran. She touched his sleeve, the arm that still could not feel, and whispered, "I once prayed you would fly. I never thought the sky could be so cruel." Bran managed to smile. The sky was always cruel. We just never touched its teeth before. She pressed a kiss to his brow. "Come home to us, little brother." He closed his eyes. In that moment, the smell of Winterfell's kitchens fragrant with bread filled his chest, and the Cave of Roots seemed far away. Dawn greased the horizon with a sickly red. Bran and Daenerys mounted their dragons beyond the outer rampart. Rhaegal could fly again, though stiff. Drogon snorted at the cold, excited to burn something. Viserion's wounds glowed ember-bright where salve met scale, but his wings beat true. They launched in unison and tore eastward in low formation. Below, Stannis' men spread wildfire into bronze bowls along trench lines. Unsullied hammered stakes, Karstark archers knocked black-veined shafts. Jon rode the perimeter, checking each knot of defense. He felt a calm settle, lethal, absolute, the calm of a man who has relinquished tomorrow. The dragons reached the 3rd forge as sun climbed a single breadth. Here the Night King himself labored, spear upright beside a pool of glassy night water. Dozens of walkers encircled him, their armaments crackling with star ice. The army behind stretched endless, a glacier of death marching toward the wall. Bran felt the horror of it like centuries of midnight pressing on his chest. Dany pulled Drogon into a steep climb, intending a plunge of flame. Bran signaled caution. Too many spears. But the Queen's eyes were fire and wind. She dove. Drogon's roar shattered sky. Flame cascaded scarlet down, meeting a wall of rising frost whipped forth by the Night King's outstretched palm. Fire hissed, guttered, died into sparking embers that clinked against ice like iron on anvil. Bran's heart lurched. Rhaegal followed, green fire mixing, but the frost storm expanded. flames recoiled. The Night King did not move. He seemed a statue of winter crowned in star steel. Then he lifted the celestial spear. Bran knew the throw would come. He drove Viserion between the spear's arc and Drogon. A scream tore from Dragon's throat. The spear struck, exploding scale, driving through shoulder joint, pinning wing to bone. The force hurled Viserion sidelong into Regal. Both dragons crashed through tree crowns, carving a ravine of broken pines. Dust and snow geysered. Bran's mind reeled. He felt blood gush, muscle rip. Sensation dimmed to a ringing void. Somewhere distant, he heard Daenerys cry out. From the haze, Bran saw the Night King stride to the ravine's lip, raising a second spear conjured from water vapor swirling around his fist. One kill would not suffice. He meant to finish them. In that fracture of time, Bran's vision split. He saw himself in the Cave of Roots years ago, hands in shaggy fur, wolf and boy one. He saw Jaime's shove. He saw Summer's leap, Hodder's sacrifice. All roads pointed here, to a gorge of blood and ice. He reached beyond his fear, beyond pain, into something deeper. The hum of weirwood sap, the roar of dragons yet unborn. He flung his spirit not only into Viserion but into the wound itself, into the spear lodged in flesh, the star metal. Fire met celestial frost. Sparks of red and blue spiraled. The spear quaked. Bran felt its temperature. Absence of heat, perfect void. He poured into it every memory of warmth. Mother's embrace, Ned's smile, Arya's laughter, Rickon's wild whoop. The metal shuddered, Fisher's spiderwebbing. It screamed, an unearthly keening only magic could hear, and burst inside Viserion, fragments liquefying into droplets of starlight that hissed harmless against muscle. The wound bled free, but the killing cold was gone. The Night King paused. He tilted his head, as if considering insoluble theorem. Then he raised both arms. Frost rippled outward. Snow began to fall in reverse, drawn skyward into swirling vortexes forming giant spears of spinning ice. Dozens, hundreds, an impossible storm of arrows ready to rain death. Bran shouted inside the dragon's mind. Viserion heaved to feet. Drogon swooped overhead, flame renewing. Bran sensed Dany's desperation. She would charge again and die. Wait, he projected, cutting through rage. The spear's hour is broken. Burn him now. She banked, trusting. Drogon and Regal rose as one, breathing twin torrents that merged into a river of white-hot plasma. Bran pulled Viserion's breath to join them. 3 dragons exhaled. Fire fused into something brighter than dawn. A column so fierce it dulled color from the world. The inverted snow weapons evaporated mid-sky, droplets vaporizing before they fell. The flame struck the Night King and his forge. Ice shattered, star metal puddled. The walkers nearest ignited blue, then dissolved. When the glare faded, the forge pit was gone, replaced by a slush crater steaming like a hellmouth. No figure stood within. Only shards of scorched ice littered the glassy pool. Exhaustion crashed over Bran. He felt Viserion sway. Blood loss slowed heart thunder. Drogon landed beside them. Dany leapt down, eyes glimmering tears and smoke. She pressed her palm to Viserion's cheek. The dragon wheezed, a note of weary triumph. Regal hovered overhead, roaring the victory to a sky streaked copper by rising sun. Bran sagged against the queen as healers ran forward. "Is he dead?" she asked, voice trembling. Bran looked north. In the far distance, the host of whites had not yet halted. They marched still, though slower, as if a thread had been clipped from the marionette's hand. He sensed no command shaping them, yet momentum carried their mass. "I don't know," Bran whispered, vision swimming, "but his spear is broken, and winter bleeds." Daenerys gripped his shoulders. "Then we ride for the wall and finish this before night falls." She turned to Grey Worm. "Signal Stannis. Ready all reserves." Dragons launched once more, Regal guiding Viserion's faltering wing in updraft, Drogon circling guard. Flame glowed again in their throats, but it was a different fire now, tempered by loss, sharpened by near ruin. They streaked south, 3 comets trailing cinders of destiny. Behind them, in the melted crater, steam coalesced around a single fragment of star steel, still pulsing with ghost light. Frost lines inched toward it, knitting, and somewhere deep beneath snow older than memory, the Night King's consciousness drifted like a shard of black ice seeking purchase. But Bran flew, and as long as a dragon's shadow cleaved the dawn, hope refused to freeze. They reached the wall by midday. Stannis had the kill zone lit, trenches roaring green gold. The White Army approached in ragged phalanxes bereft of guiding menace, yet still lethal by sheer press of numbers. Scorpions sang, caltrops shredded frostbitten feet. Wildfire doused the horde in sick flame. Viserion circled, loosing breath where lines thickened. Drogon strafed from the rear. Regal guarded the breaches. Melisandre atop the central stair knelt amid her pyres, chanting. Her hands flared bright red. Fire spiraled skyward, wreathing the dragons in halos of living ruby. As the sun tipped west, the final ranks of the dead collapsed into embers and blackened shards. Silence sprawled, broken only by the crackle of burning trenches and the groan of the wall settling under its own ancient weight. Men wept, some from shock, others from relief. Women knelt and prayed to any god still listening. Bran slid from Viserion's neck, stumbling. Jon caught him and held tight. Around them the dragons landed, folding wings like weary banners. Daenerys approached, ash-flecked, hair matted to her temples. She surveyed the field, charred, obscene, and then looked north where the horizon shimmered an eerie calm. "Is it over?" she asked. "No," Bran said, "but today we ended his spear and his forges. Whatever comes next will not be the war he planned." Jon met her gaze. "We have breath now. We'll use it to forge alliances, not weapons." Stannis strode to them, Lightbringer still smoking, helm under arm. He inclined head barely to Dany and Bran. "We win when snow melts. Until then, the wall stands." He turned to Jon. "Lord Commander, you hold. I ride south to break Lannister lines and open grain routes." Jon nodded, though he knew another war waited beyond this frost. As dusk fell, Bran guided Viserion to perch upon the Icegate Tower, looking out across a world both shattered and reborn. Wolves howled from the shadowed forest. Ravens spiraled upward, then settled among the dragon's spines as though roots on new soil. Bran closed his eyes, feeling pulse within pulse. The heart of winter slowed, its beat ragged. Beneath that lull, deeper, something ancient stirred. Older than Night King, older than Valyria. But the sky lifted vast and clean, and for the first time since his fall, Bran thought the world might yet live to see a spring not painted black by ash. He whispered a promise to the wind, to summer's distant echo, to every child's laughter still possible. Not today, cold, not while fire flies. And far below, flames licked trenches like garlands of living dawn, holding the dark at least one breath longer, enough, perhaps, for hope to take root in thawing earth. A hush had settled over the battlements after the day-long slaughter, that grappling silence one only hears in the wake of overburdened victory. Torches hissed as sleet spat into their flames, steam lifting like startled souls. The courtyard of Eastwatch was clotted with the debris of 2 wars. Splintered scorpion arms, bodies waiting for pyres, coils of sooty chain that had once hoisted cauldrons of pitch. No one spoke above a whisper. Too many throats remembered screaming. Bran reclined near the base of the Icegate Tower in a wicker sling the blacksmiths had modified into a crude litter. His limp legs were wrapped in bear fur, but the cold seeped through bone like second skin. Viserion slept only 20 paces away, head pillowed on a crumpled wagon. Rising steam tickled the ragged crimson seam where star metal had stabbed clean through. Maester Aemon's greasy poultice had blackened along the wound, but each exhale from the dragon glowed faint gold beneath. Fire healing fire. Bran's eyes, silvered with exhaustion, drifted over the frenetic bustle. Asha Greyjoy's raiders drank from barrels meant for horse feed. They clanged mug against mug, each clang softer than the previous. Voices had gone hoarse, even laughter ached. The unsullied stacked white bones into pyramids, dousing them with lamp oil while Grey Worm intoned the ancient words of a death blessing he had learned in Astapor. Baratheon knights walked among the corpses, touching Lightbringer to each husk's brow to ensure no fragment of sorcery lingered. The blade sizzled every time it kissed flesh. The smell was wet charcoal and misery. A figure emerged from the mass. Jon, still armored, dark hair whip-tied behind his neck. He knelt at Bran's side. "Drink something," he insisted, offering a saddleskin of hot crabapple cider.
Bran sipped, tart sweetness time-cracked lips.
"Better. You first," Bran rasped, passing it back. Jon drank deep, then wiped his mouth with a bandaged wrist. In the flicker of torchlight, his pupils looked too old for the face around them. "Riders returned from the Shadow Tower," he reported quietly. "They say a second army splinters east toward the gorge. Smaller, thousands still. Without the Night King controlling them, they're moving slow. But they're moving." Bran bit the inside of his cheek. "He's dividing us." Jon nodded. "He knows the wall is strongest where men watch. If he can push enough dead through unguarded passes, he might reignite south with plague and terror alone." Bran considered. "How many dragons can we fly tomorrow?" "Drogon, yes. Regal perhaps half a day at best. Viserion." Jon's glance flicked to the wounded dragon. "He won't leave you behind, but that wing, it'll hold." Bran's voice sharpened. His link with Viserion pulsed agreement in his chest. "He'll fly if I ask." Jon sighed. "And you?" Bran felt the tremor in his hands. "I'll keep." Footfalls behind them. Sansa, cloak dusted in sleet, Rickon trailing close as if the younger brother feared loose edges in the world might swallow his sister whole. Sansa crouched. "Stannis wants counsel in the long hall before dawn. Something about levies and supply lines to hold the gorge." Jon muttered. "He wants to borrow men we don't have. He wants us to do the impossible with half a kingdom," Bran added, half smiling. "Which is our family trade." Rickon held out a small carving of ebony wood to Bran, a wolf with wings. "Shaggy Dog found it in the snow," the boy whispered. "It looked like you." Bran turned the figurine under torch glow. The wings were rough, half-finished, but the wolf's snout was proud, ears back as if bracing into wind. "Thank you," Bran said, throat tight. A horn's hollow boom rolled across the yard, 3 notes. Not 2, not 1. Silence swarmed. Every head rose. 3 blasts. Enemy? But watchers along the parapet shouted words muffled by wind. "Ships! South! Banners white!" Jon rose, hand on long claw, but no urgency rang in the guard's tone. More astonishment than alarm. Asha Greyjoy vaulted a pile of crates, face splitting into a grin as she sprinted up the ice stair. Bran focused, slipped briefly into a raven perched on the battlement. Below, the wintry sea heaved with a flotilla of compact clinker-built cogs flying the Kraken and a white field painted with red handprints. Ironborn and Skago's wildlings. Trailing them, a towering cog flew a banner of a broken chain of flame. Slaves freed from Slaver's Bay. Jon joined Asha at the Merlin, eyes wide. She slapped his arm. "My kindly uncles decided life's shorter than feuds," she crowed, "and pirates smell profit in living customers." The first ships nosed into the half-frozen shallows, crunching ice floes aside. Gangplanks dropped. From cages on deck shuffled rag-robed men and women emancipated by Daenerys' earlier campaigns across the sea. Grey Worm strode forward, meeting them at the water's edge. He and their leader, an aged Giscari priest in yellow tatters, bowed to one another wordlessly. Bran felt a tremor ripple through the armies. This was more than numbers. It was proof that fire forged hearts across oceans. Night bled into bleary early morning gray. The long hall's stone hearth roared while wind keened against rattling shutters. Around a makeshift map table huddled a knot of commanders. Stannis in boiled leather breastplate, Daenerys draped in a riding cloak slick with dragon grease, Jon and Sansa, Asha with salt still glistening in her beard, Grey Worm silent beside his queen, Davos with parchment lists, Melisandre near the hearth flames, red eyes dancing reflections of futures she did not share. Stannis stabbed a dagger into the map, point piercing a crude drawing of the gorge, a deep cleft east of the Frostfangs whose floor rolled gentle as farmland but whose walls were nearly sheer. My advanced scouts confirm the second dead host will reach this valley in 3 days. He measured with dirty fingernail. If they breach there, nothing stands between them and the green fields of the north. They'll skirt fortified keeps, slaughter small folk too scattered to muster, and by the time we pivot half the countryside will be white. Jon spoke. The bulk of our field infantry cannot redeploy that far east in time. Davos nodded, unfurling a vellum. Roads are snow-choked. Even with sledges, we'd lose half wagons to drifts. Asha tipped her chair back. Then we sail mouth of the gorge, land behind them. Frozen shallows will scuttle hulls, Davos warned. Eyes turned to Daenerys. She stood hands steepled. Dragons could strike the column while men march north along the ridge. Concerted hammer and anvil. Jon frowned. We risk all 3 again. Bran's voice came quiet. Not me. I can guide Viserion along the flank, harry but not commit. The other 2 sweep the column's head. He gestured to a chalk line on the map. Meanwhile, we carve a fire trench at this pass, narrow but enough to funnel them. Stannis stared. With what engineer corps? Our miners froze 2 nights ago. Bran's gaze flickered to Melisandre. Fire priests can melt stone. She tilted her head, flame reflections licking her cheeks. Blood and fire, my prince. Arguments flared. Supply versus speed. Risk versus necessity. At last Daenerys raised a hand. Compromise. Drogon and Rhaegal strike the rear, Viserion the head. We leave Jon to command trenches at the pass while Stannis leads a mounted column down the ridge. When the dead break, Jon's torches ignite the sap trencheries. If all else fails, we fall back to the wall. Silence, then one by one, grim nods. Plans cascaded outward like ripples. Messengers on shaggy garrons galloped north and west. Wildling trappers felled trees to flood sap into barrels. Blacksmiths repurposed broken scorpion limbs into torch racks. Maester Aemon dictated ravens to White Harbor. Send every barge with stave wood and honey oil. Sansa oversaw ration distribution, brow furrowed as she calculated how long even salted goat could last. Late that evening, Bran found himself alone with Melisandre atop the wall's dizzying crest. The wind stabbed, but she seemed unbothered in her thin crimson silks. She studied him with a half-smile. You twist many threads, Brandon Stark. I only follow where they lead. Do you know why your fire undid the fallen star? Bran shook his head. Only that it broke when I poured myself into it. She stepped closer, breath a warm petal. Light without shadow is a lie. You filled that void with memories, living shadows, and the void could not contain them. That is your gift. Not merely sight, but the binding of light and darkness into story. Remember that when next the void opens jaws. He swallowed. Will it open tonight? In every dream, she replied, turning away. The question is who wakes first. Hours before dawn, Bran sat cross-legged in the Godswood courtyard. The single weirwood Eastwatch possessed, gnarled and wind-bent but alive. He laid the ebony wolf figurine at its root and closed his eyes. Silence. Then the world expanded. He flew hundreds of feet above sea, then dove into curling froth. He swam beneath ice floes, felt the heartbeat of leviathans slumbering in depths. He soared over Skagos where unicorn spirits pawed frozen earth. Horn tips blew with moonfire. He alighted upon the spear tip of a mountain and looked north. In the far distance a figure moved, lone, limping, a silhouette of jagged armor and cracked crown. Ice chipped from glacier. The Night King. He pushed through drifts alone, spearless hand outstretched as though seeking something lost. Frost blossomed under each step. Bran's first instinct was to summon flame, but he hesitated. A fragment only, the consciousness winnowed after star metals shatter. Nearby, lesser walkers herded dead into ranks, yet none approached the limp monarch. They looked askance, like soldiers awaiting orders from a general who had forgotten their language. A thought surfaced. If the Night King was weakened, might he be broken? Not by fire, he had weathered dragon flame once, but by the story of warmth, the memory that had cracked starsteel. People. Bran tested the sky, too dark for ravens to travel swiftly, so he reached for wolves. Across leagues a pair of shadowy shapes stirred. Summer's distant kin left in the wild when Bran marched south. They howled, and their pack answered, a chorus that split the veil of sky. The distant whites paused, heads cocked, as the undercurrent of living heartbeat pulsed in sound. The Night King halted. Bran felt the eerie hush. Suspicion. The monarch lifted his cracked crown skyward and breathed. No wind, not even a swirl of frost. Silence swallowed the howl. Then he resumed his limp. Bran withdrew, sweating. The Night King still moved. But now Bran knew the crown's fissure reached beneath armor into spirit. He did not share this with anyone. Knowledge of cracks could inspire recklessness. The following dawn bloomed bleared and sulfur-tinged. Dragons launched, wings buffeting towers. Snow spindrift whirled into cyclones. Bran slid into Viserion's harness. A leather net cinched about chest and shoulders, leaving crippled legs cradled in loops. Asha clapped him on the back. If you land in the sea, sing louder than sirens. He grinned, heart hammering. They rose in column. Viserion ahead, Drogon back left, Regal back right. Bran felt for Daenerys' mind, a bright beacon of iron will, and sensed her nod through Drogon's spine. They veered east, dwindling to embers in the dawn. Below, Jon oversaw trench workers. The sap barrels stank like sweet rot. Wildlings coated stakes with bare fat, ensuring flames would cling. Stannis' cavalry already filed down the western ridge, banners snapping. Melisandre prowled the parapets, lips moving in steady cadence. Hours passed. The sun reached sullen zenith behind gauzy cloud. Across the valley rolled a gray wall of corpses, their march quieter than any army's. Limbs frozen stiff hammered tundra in syncopated rhythm, a heartbeat stuttering eternal. Behind first ranks rode mounted wights astride haggard elk skeletons. Scattered among them prowled bone wyverns, skulls still stained by scorch scars from earlier battles. Jon raised a torch. On command, archers loosed. Shafts whistled, each tip dragonglass. When they struck, wights toppled like saplings felled by lightning. But the ranks behind closed, pressing forward, trampling fallen. Light it, Jon shouted. Asha's ironborn hurled firepots. Unsullied tossed torches. The trench line ignited into a curving orange serpent. Plumes of sticky pitch soared, coating front lines in tar. Flames bit, wights writhed, yet others crawled over charred comrades. The trench served, funneling, slowing, but not stopping. Then the sky shook. Viserion dove, jaws open. White gold fire lanced the ranked center. Wights vaporized, wyverns shrieked. Dragon shadow raced ground like a scythe. Drogon followed, banking to rake the flank. Regal, still stiff, glided in slower arcs, scorching edges of formation. Suddenly Bran felt cold across mind, like an eclipse. He pivoted Viserion's gaze north. From a copse of dead firs advanced the Night King. He walked alone, both hands bare, but around his torso spiraled ethereal mist that congealed into a new weapon. A spear half ice, half shimmering shards of the star metal fragment. Shaped by will, not forge, Bran's pulse faltered. He called to Daenerys. The spear reborn, she banked Drogon wide. Regal shrilled alarm. Bran wheeled Viserion, but the wing jittered. Torn tendons protested. The Night King planted his bare feet on snow's crust, lifted the spear with one hand. Light bent. Star-metalled tip swallowed color. Wind died. Even wights paused, as though awaiting omen. Bran poured every memory he owned into Viserion. Father smiling in the courtyard, Arya splashing through puddles, Sansa singing off-key, Rickon chasing cats, Hotter's hotter, echoing through halls, Summer's soft growl in the dark. The dragon's chest glowed. He climbed, flapping hard despite pain, rising above the spear's likely arc. But the Night King did not aim skyward. He aimed at the trench line at Jon Snow. Bran's heart seized. The spear left the monarch's hand silently. Air peeled around its passage. Bran dove, wings burning, but distance mocked speed. Jon stood on the rampart, torch in hand. His gaze lifted. A heartbeat's pause, recognition of death's messenger. Ghost snarled, leapt, as though to intercept, and would have died uselessly. Jon flung himself sideways. The spear clipped stone, sheared crenellations as though butter, and exploded past, straight into the central oil store hut. A roar like God's tearing fabric erupted. Fireball blossomed green and black, a bloom of wildfire. Shockwave tossed men from walls, shattered ice mortar. The trench sagged. Sections of wall face cracked. Flames sprayed inward, igniting nearby wagons of pitch. Chaos. The Night King's face betrayed no triumph. He simply began forging another spear from condensed rime. Bran's desperation peaked. He whispered to Viserion, "Old magic, roots, blood. Remember." He reached through the dragon's eyes into the weirwood network, each root a nerve, each leaf a thought. They surged, tingling through his marrow, and with them came power. Snow beneath the Night King erupted in sudden knots of hardwood, red leaves spiking from ice. They wrapped around his legs, binding. He paused, confusion sliding like a crack across frozen mask. Another spear, half-formed, fell from stiffening fingers. Bran forced the roots higher, climbing torso, arms. Yet frost radiated from the monarch's skin. Bark blackened, shattered. He tore free, but the moment bought precious seconds. Viserion's breath pummeled the Night King full on. This time Bran flooded it with story. The laughter of freed children, the tremor of lovers' first kiss, the chorus of blacksmith hammers forging plowshares after war. Fire metamorphosed, white at core, streaming motes like falling petals. It struck, and the Night King staggered, skin cracking. He howled, a sound like glaciers calving. Drogon and Regal committed, weaving twin cones of flame, sandwiching him. Snow liquefied, ground sizzled glassy. The monarch's form flickered, ice melting, reforming, but slower, weaker. His crown fractured further. He raised both hands in feudal ward. And then Stannis' cavalry swept the ridge. The king galloped at forefront, Lightbringer blazing. He spurred into the melted swale, leapt the bubbling fissure, and with a roar chopped downward. Lightbringer met cracking ice flesh, a flare of orange-white seared sky. The Night King's torso split like overripe fruit. Shards of blue energy spiraled upward and vanished in a soft sigh, like a blizzard inhaling. For a breath, nothing moved. Then the white army convulsed. Bones buckled, ice whites flickered. Whites collapsed where they stood, brittle shells unmanned. Wyverns overhead shrieked, wings folding inward. They plunged, shattering on stones. Silence rammed the valley. Bran exhaled through Viserion's quivering throat. The dragon circled once, then landed beyond the smoking trench. Men cautious, awestruck, approached fallen corpses. No blue light stirred behind dead eyes. Jon crawled over rubble of the hut, bruised but breathing. Ghost nudged him upright. He surveyed valley of inert bodies. Grey Worm raised spear in salute. Wildlings pounded axes on shields. Asha let out a whoop so loud gulls scattered. Stannis dismounted next to the cracked husk that had been the Night King. Only a jagged shard of starsteel crown remained, fused to icy scalp. He pried it loose with gauntlet hand. The metal hissed, still colder than death. He strode to Bran, holding it out. "Your kill," he admitted, voice rough. Bran shook head. "Ours. Burn it." Melisandre stepped forward, accepting shard in crimson cloth. "Light shall eat light," she murmured. She lobbed it into a brazier where wildfire licked emerald. The shard sank, glowed, and dissolved like frost on tongue. Dusk bled red by the time survivors gathered on the ridge. Daenerys climbed a boulder, wind whipping her braids. Dragons settled behind, looming silhouettes. "The long night breaks," she called, voice hoarse yet sure. Not by dragon flame alone, nor sword, nor fire priest's right, but by every beating heart that would not yield. She raised fist. Cheers rippled, soft at first, then swelling. A tumult neither king nor queen nor greenseer could command, only witness. Bran felt the weirwood roots exhale. Centuries of burden lifted an inch, but he also felt deeper tremors. Not malice, not ice, but shift of plates when weight relieved. Balance demanded new stories for new dawns. His own role, unspooling beyond Dragon's saddle, now bent toward shepherding fractured kingdoms. In the days that followed, the living burned the dead, friend and foe alike. The smoke column towered, black skirting heaven, carrying names no bard had strength to tally. Wraiths of ash drifted to the shivering sea, fell upon curling waves and vanished. Snow turned gray, then white again. Peace did not bloom overnight. Famine threatened. Ravens still bore summons to war in the south. Yet hope dug small stubborn roots. Skago's wildlings shared goat cheeses with Unsullied. Baratheon smiths taught Ironborn how to weld broken scorpion arms into plows. Sansa drafted letters inviting Dawnish harvest wagons to White Harbor, promising fair trade. Stannis grumbled as he affixed his seal, but Melt in his scowl hinted at grudging trust. Bran spent mornings with Maester Aemon, cataloging every scrap of magic that had passed. How star metal resisted flame until tempered by human memory, how roots could snare frost. Aemon called Bran my eyes, for the Maester's own were failing fast. One dawn the old man pressed a cracked, featherlight wyvern bone into Bran's palm. A quill for new histories, he whispered. Bran vowed to write carefully. Evenings, Bran sat beneath the godswood, touching the ebony wolf figurine. Viserion curled nearby, drowsy, wing healing. The dragon's presence warmed tree bark, coaxing buds despite prevailing chill. Bran carved the wolf's unfinished wings, shaping with a dragonglass tip. He dreamed of a world where wolves might truly fly without dragon fire, carried by stories alone. On the seventh day, as workers dismantled final pyres, Daenerys approached him. Snowflakes melted in her hair. "The South waits," she said. "If Cersei hears of the Night King's fall, she may strike before our alliance's root." Bran nodded. "Westeros will need more than dragons now. It'll need roads repaired, fields cleared, courts less hungry." She smiled wryly. "Will you be my counselor? My memory of what was nearly lost?" Bran considered the cave, the raven, the rootverse still calling. "I must be in many places at once," he answered. "But I can teach others how to listen." She extended a hand. "Then teach me." He clasped it. Her grip was warm, steady. Jon joined them, cloak flapping. He glanced at their joined hands, a flicker of amusement crossing stoic face. "We ride for Winterfell tomorrow," he said, "with wolves and dragons both." Daenerys nodded. "Then the realm will know the long night truly ended." Bran gazed north beyond extinguished trenches, where horizon shimmered rose and pearl. Somewhere beneath endless snow, fragments of ancient evil lay dormant again, but not erased. The world would forget as it always did. The weirwoods would remember. So would he, and maybe that was enough. He placed the ebony wolf on the weirwood root. A gust stirred, lifting crimson leaves around the figurine. Bran smiled, and in Viserion's distant heartbeat he heard echo of future wing beats. Not of war, but of children laughing beneath dragons gliding through spring skies, free, unchained, stories alive once more. The wind shifted south, carrying smell of thaw. Bran closed his eyes, listening. Not for spears of ice or screams of dead, but for drip of meltwater, hush of soil surrendering to sun. In that quiet dawn between wars, he felt the first note of a new song swelling across the kingdoms, fragile, off-key, yet gloriously alive. And he thought, "Fly forward, little wolf." The sky at last was wide enough,